This crazy reincarnation turned Naruto into a centuries-old spider bull yokai who casually erases armies, regenerates from explosions. He built a body count that makes legends cry, and a love story that hits different. This is the darkest, most badass what-if that'll leave you screaming for more.
The root facility smelled like iron and bleach. 8-year-old Naruto Uzumaki had followed a stray ginger cat down an alley that should have dead-ended at a brick wall. Instead, the wall slid back on a hinge older than the boy himself. A staircase dropped into the earth. The cat bolted into the dark, and the kid with whisker marks on his cheeks followed, because no one in the village had ever invited him anywhere. And a cat glancing back like that was the closest thing to an invitation he had ever received in his short, lonely life. He patted down the steps in sandals 2 sizes too big, orange jumpsuit, goggles pushed up on his forehead. He looked like any other rejected street kid in Konoha. A loose tooth, a scab on his elbow, eyes too blue for a face this thin. The corridor at the bottom of the staircase stretched in both directions like an animal's gut. Cells lined the walls. Children sat inside them. Some had bandaged eyes. Some had stitched mouths. Some had been sleeping so long their hair grew through the floor grates. Naruto stopped walking. His face went blank. Then it went still. Then it went somewhere else. The cat was forgotten. The loose tooth was forgotten. Every small, ordinary thing he had been carrying around inside him a moment ago slid away like sand off a glass plate, and underneath that surface, something opened its eyes for the first time in centuries. A man stepped from the shadows at the far end of the corridor. Bandaged arm, one eye, a face like a knife wrapped in old linen. A vessel, Danzo Shimura said, walking right into our nursery. He raised one finger. The walls produced ambu the way a wound produces blood, 12 of them. Black masks, tanto already drawn. They closed around the boy in a perfect circle, and weapons leveled at the small frame in orange, and Danzo gave the order with the same tone a man uses to tell a servant to draw a bath. Erase him. The blades went in. 12 points of cold steel punched through Naruto's chest, ribs, lungs, stomach, and back. The tips clinked together inside him. Blood ran out of his mouth in a thin red rope. He did not scream. He looked at Danzo across the room with a small, almost curious tilt of his head, as if the old warhawk had just said something interesting at a tea ceremony. Then, in the silence that followed, the air itself seemed to forget how to move. The cell lights buzzed and died. The floor pulsed once like a drum. A black pressure poured out of the boy's body, the way smoke pours out of a furnace door left open. The ambu recoiled. One of them tried to step back and could not lift his foot. The blades they had buried in the child began to glow, then warp, then weep down their hilts as if they were melting. A pentagram of pure black fire etched itself into the stone beneath Naruto's bleeding sandals. 5-pointed, old, older than the village, older than the country. Older than the word for country. Black lightning crawled along the corridor in jagged veins. The light bulbs at the far end exploded in sequence, one by one, like a row of dominoes falling toward Danzo. Naruto's spine arched. 2 thick, demonic horns pressed up out of his hairline and curled toward the ceiling. The skin between his shoulder blades split open in a sound like wet cloth tearing, and 4 spider legs, jet black, segmented, plated like obsidian armor, unfolded from his back. They braced themselves against the stone floor and the cell bars in the ceiling at once. The boy now stood inside a bone cage of his own making, suspended above the ground. The tanto still lodged in his chest hissed and pushed themselves back out, 1 inch at a time, until they clattered onto the stone at his feet. The wounds underneath closed in tendrils of black flame that smelled faintly of burning sugar. He breathed in, he breathed out. His voice came back wrong. Wrong because it was right. Wrong because it belonged to a man who had been dead for centuries, slid into the throat of a child like a hand into a glove. Insects are truly fascinating. They reproduce so quickly. He looked at the lit ambu, just looked. The man's mask came apart in the middle, as if a vice had closed around it. Then the skull underneath came apart in the middle the same way. There was a small puff of red mist, a sound like a cough, and the body folded forward at the knees without a head to balance it. The other 11 moved at once because they had been trained to move at once. They had been trained out of fear long ago. Most of them did not remember their own names. They came at the boy with the discipline of machines that had forgotten they were people. He held out one small hand, palm down. The first 3 lifted off the ground, hung in midair with their feet kicking weakly, and then collapsed inward as though a star were forming inside each of their chests. They did not have time to make a sound. The next 4 were impaled, 1 through the throat, 2 through the sternum, 1 through the eye, on spider legs that moved faster than the Ambu's eyes could track them. The remaining 4 turned to run. Naruto turned his head. A single drop of blood ran down his chin and hit the pentagram on the floor. The pentagram lit up. The 4 runners turned to ash inside their armor. Then the armor itself came apart in a fall of black flakes that hissed when they touched the stone. By the time Danzo had taken his first step backward, every root operative in the corridor was either a stain or a memory. The boy let his spider legs lower him gently to the floor. The horns withdrew into his hairline. The pentagram dimmed, but did not vanish. It would never quite vanish from underneath him again. He walked down the corridor past the cells. He did not look at the children inside them. He looked at the locks. The locks fell apart in his hand, the way old bread crumbles. The children inside the cells did not look at him either. They looked at the floor, because everyone who had ever entered this corridor had taught them to look at the floor. He reached the last cell. He stopped. He turned to face Danzo Shimura. "You built a hive in my house," he said. His tone was almost polite, the way a host is polite when he finds a stranger sleeping in his bed. "I will pull the eggs out of the walls in time. Today, I have an errand. Today, you will live to remember what came down the stairs and looked at you. Run or stay. The errand does not care." Danzo's hand had drifted to his bandaged arm. He did not finish the motion. The boy was no longer at the end of the corridor. The boy was in front of him. A small fist closed around the bandages on Danzo's right arm. Through the cloth, something inside the arm shrieked, a sound like 10 voices waking at once and then choking off. The Sharingan implanted in the limb cracked across its iris. The bandages browned at the edges and curled. "I see," Naruto said. "You collect eyes. How quaint." He let go. Danzo stumbled back, clutching at his arm. The boy in orange walked past him without another word. 8 years old, whiskers on his cheeks, sandals slapping against the stone, blood drying on his jumpsuit and rusty bibs. By the time Danzo recovered enough to look up, the staircase at the end of the corridor was empty, and the door at the top stood open to a square of afternoon sunlight. Naruto climbed back up into the city. He stepped out of the alley into the warm light of an early summer afternoon. A vegetable cart rattled past him. A pair of academy students chased each other across a bridge. A pigeon landed on a fence and tilted its head at him with the same curiosity the cat had used. He looked down at his bloody hands. He looked up at the sky. He flexed his fingers as a man flexes new gloves. He said. His voice was a child's voice again, almost. "This world is small." Then a noise reached him from a courtyard on his left. A girl's voice, humming. The clean snip of garden shears, the faint, sharp green smell of a flower being cut at the stem. His feet turned toward the sound before his mind had decided to. The Yamanaka flower field sat between a tall wooden fence and a low slope of grass. Rows and rows of color, white, yellow, soft pink, deep blue. The kind of color that belonged to a world that had not yet learned the word for cruelty. A girl with long blonde hair tied back in a ribbon knelt at the edge of one row, patting dirt around the roots of a young iris with both hands. Her tongue stuck out of the corner of her mouth in concentration. She was 9. She had a smudge of soil on one cheek. She looked up. She saw the boy at the gate of the field. She saw the blood on his sleeves, and the blood drying in his hair, and the spatters across his sandals, and the way his eyes were 2 colors at once, blue at the surface and something else underneath, and her mouth opened in a tiny, sharp gasp. He waited for her to scream. Every other child in Konoha would have screamed. Every other child in Konoha had screamed at far less. He had spent 8 years inside a body these children threw rocks at on the street. She did not scream. She wiped her hands on her apron, stood up, and walked over to him. "Are you hurt?" she said. The ancient thing inside the boy paused. It had been ready to receive horror. Now, it had 100 different responses waiting for horror, ranging from indifference to amused contempt. It had no response waiting for that. "I am well," he said. The words came out of a child's throat with the cadence of a much older man, and the girl tilted her head at him the way the pigeon had tilted its head at him. "You're really bloody, though," she said. "Did some big kids hit you again? I heard some of the older boys do that. Papa says it's because they're stupid and afraid." "Some big kids," he agreed slowly. "Yes, that is one way to phrase it." She frowned at him. Then she reached up and took his hand in both of hers without asking, and tugged him through the gate into the flower field, and sat him down on a flat stone at the edge of the rows, and ran into the little house at the back of the property, and came out with a damp cloth and a cup of water. She knelt in front of him and started wiping the blood off his cheek with the cloth. He let her. He could have killed every living thing within a kilometer of this field with a sigh. He let a 9-year-old girl with a soil smudge on her cheek clean his face with a wet rag. "My name is Ino Yamanaka," she said. "You're Naruto, right? You sit at the back in Iruka-sensei's lessons. You drew a frog on my desk last spring. You remember that? It was a good frog." She squinted at a spot of red on his collar and rubbed harder. "Most of the boys can only draw squares. The frog had eyebrows." He almost smiled. He did not, but the thing inside him that had spent centuries staring at the world like an unimpressed magistrate twitched, the way a long frozen lake twitches in a single hairline crack across its surface. She finished cleaning his face and sat back on her heels. "There," she said. "Better. You look less scary now." He looked past her at the rows of irises and lilies and bell-shaped flowers he had no names for. He looked at the bees moving from blossom to blossom in their drunken, important little errands. He looked at the way the late sun made each petal a little lantern. He looked at the girl who had wiped a stranger's blood off her hands without being asked. Somewhere inside him, a vow took shape. It was a private vow. He did not say it aloud. He filed it away the way a king files away an edict for his own records. The field would stand. The girl would stand. Whatever passed through this fragile little garden of color and bees and patient knees in the dirt would pass through him first and would regret it. "Ino," he said. The name felt unfamiliar in his mouth. Then it didn't. "Thank you." She brightened the way a flower brightens when a cloud moves off the sun. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "I'll show you the lilies that haven't opened yet. They open at night. They're my favorite." He stood up. He inclined his head a fraction of an inch. It was the smallest possible bow, but to anyone who could read it, it was a bow that an emperor would have given to a peer. "Tomorrow," he said. He walked out of the gate. The girl waved after him. He did not look back, but he registered the wave the way a general registers a flag on the horizon, with full awareness and full intention to return to it. Behind him, in an underground corridor across the village, Danzo Shimura sat on a stool with his bandaged arm cradled in his lap, listening to the silence where his entire facility used to be, and asked the only operative left in the room, in a voice that had aged 10 years in 20 minutes, whether the Hokage had received any unusual reports today. The Hokage had. 3 root operatives had been found that evening in alleyways across the village, alive, unmasked, and unable to speak. Their tongues were intact. Their throats were intact. Their mouths simply refused to open. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat with them in the hospital for 20 minutes apiece and learned nothing, because their eyes spoke of something they had been told without words to never describe again. He went home, lit his pipe, and did not sleep. Somewhere in the village, an 8-year-old boy with whisker marks on his cheeks washed the last of the blood out of his orange jumpsuit in a sink. The water ran red, then pink, then clean. He hung the jumpsuit by the window to dry. He sat down on the floor of his apartment and stared at his own hands for an hour, flexing the fingers, examining the lines on the palm, learning the shape of this small, regenerating instrument he had been given for his second life. Then he went to bed. He came back to the flower field the next day, and the next, and the next. Ino set up a little stool for him. She gave him a name for every flower in the rows and quizzed him on them. He learned them all on the first pass and never forgot one, but he pretended to forget the names of the bellflowers the second week because she liked teaching them to him. The ancient thing inside him noticed itself indulging her and did not stop itself. It found that strange. It did not stop anyway. Inoichi Yamanaka watched from the kitchen window. He was the head of a clan whose entire bloodline depended on reading minds. He could feel the boy at his back gate the way other men could feel a thunderstorm coming in over a mountain ridge. The pressure on his temples was so heavy in those first weeks that he had to take headache pills with his breakfast. He sent a polite report to the Hokage, in writing, with the words potentially monstrous underlined twice. The Hokage replied in writing that he was aware. 3 months after the root incident, Inoichi met the boy in person. He stepped out onto the porch with 2 cups of tea and offered one to him. The boy accepted it. The boy sat across from him at the porch table while Ino chased a chicken around the yard. "You are aware of what I do for a living," Inoichi said. "I am aware. Then you are aware that I am very, very aware of what is sitting across from me. I am aware." Inoichi sipped his tea. His hand was steady. It was steady because he had been a jonin during a war, and steady hands were the only kind that had survived it. "My daughter," Inoichi said, "will live a long, full, well-tended life," the boy answered. "I will see to it. I did not ask you to see to it. I am aware." Inoichi looked into the boy's eyes for a long, careful breath. He did not attempt his clan technique. He had the impression that if he attempted his clan technique, he would never come back out of his own mind. He set his cup down. "I see," he said. "You do," the boy agreed rockily. He tipped his head toward the yard where Ino had cornered the chicken and was scolding it in a tone of great moral authority. "Allow me to be useful to your house, Yamanaka-san. In exchange, I require very little. A stool by the bellflowers, a name to learn for each new bloom, the privilege of being permitted to come back tomorrow." Inoichi exhaled, long and slow. "Tomorrow," he said. By the end of the first year, the boy was sleeping at the Yamanaka compound more nights than at his own apartment. Inoichi's wife stitched the elbows of his jumpsuit. Ino fed him from her own plate when his portions were too small. The clan got used to the small orange shape at the breakfast table. The clan also got used to the way every shadow on the property leaned faintly toward him in the late afternoon, the way grass leans toward a passing predator without knowing why. The village did not get used to him at all. The village would never get used to him. By the time he was 12, the rumors had grown into a quiet folklore. The boy who had walked out of a slaughter without a scratch. The boy with whisker marks who once stared down a chunin who had spit at him in the street, and the chunin had fainted on the spot for reasons no one could explain. The boy who could sit at the back of the academy classroom without moving for 4 hours and then write a flawless paper on shinobi battlefield ethics during the Second War. Iruka Umino was assigned to teach the boy. Iruka Umino was a brave man. Iruka also began drinking heavily in the evenings, and after a year of it, requested a transfer. The graduation exam was a formality. Naruto produced 3 perfect shadow clones because the instructor had asked for 3. He had not bothered to learn the technique. He had read the scroll the day before. He performed the henge by rearranging the surface of his own skin without a hand sign, which the proctor logged as irregular but passing. He scored top marks across the field and refused to take the recommended Jonin track placement because, he said, he intended to remain on Team Ino. The administrator who took that note down stared at his own pen for a full minute afterward. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat behind his desk in the Hokage Tower and read through the team assignments for the new Genin. He paused on Naruto Uzumaki's name. He paused on it for a long time. "He cannot be on Team 7, Hiruzen said to nobody since the room was empty. Kakashi Hahaki was not equipped to teach a deity. Kakashi was a fine jonin and an excellent instructor for boys who needed to learn how to grow into men. But Naruto Uzumaki did not need to learn how to grow into a man. Naruto Uzumaki had been a man twice already, and the second time he had been something more than a man. Hiruzen's pen moved. He drew a line through Team 7. He drew a circle around Team 10. He wrote Naruto's name in the slot next to Ino Yamanaka and Shino Aburame, and assigned the team to Asuma Sarutobi, his own son. Because if anyone in this village could survive standing close to that boy for any length of time, it would be a Sarutobi. He also did it because Asuma was the only jonin who had asked for the assignment. Asuma had asked for it 3 weeks before the assignments were drawn up. He had walked into the office, removed his cigarette, and said, "Give me the Uzumaki, kid." He had not given a reason. He had simply held his father's gaze and waited until his father wrote the name down. The first day of Team 10 began on the roof of the academy. Asuma sat against the railing with his hands in his pockets. Shino arrived first, in silence, with his hood up. Ino arrived second, with a string-tied bento and a hairbrush. Naruto arrived third, and the rooftop went still the moment he stepped onto it. The pigeons that had been roosting on the gutter lifted off in a single startled gust, without any of them giving a signal to the others. The air dropped 2 degrees. Asuma's cigarette went out by itself. "Right," Asuma said. He looked at the 3 of them. "Introductions." Shino went first. He was clipped, formal, and to the point. He liked beetles. He had a sister he did not see often. He intended to be a tracking specialist. Ino went second. She was bright, fast, and bossy. She liked flowers. She liked her family. She liked the boy sitting 2 seats down from her, but she did not say that part out loud because she did not need to. Naruto went third. He folded his hands on his knee. He looked Asuma in the eye. He said, "I am Naruto Uzumaki. I like the lilies in the Yamanaka South plot. I dislike pests in my garden. My ambition is to keep this team alive long enough to enjoy old age, and to ensure that no person on this team ever has cause to fear an empty room." Shino's collar moved. He had pulled it up to hide his expression. Ino smiled the way she smiled when she had won an argument before it began. Asuma relit his cigarette and looked at his own knuckles for a second too long before answering. "Pleasure to have you on the team, kid," he said. Their first 10 missions were D ranks. They retrieved a cat. They weeded a vegetable patch. They walked an old lady's groceries home. Naruto performed each task with the same untroubled attention he would have given to anything else. And by the 11th day of cat retrieval, Asuma submitted a written request to escalate the team to a C rank. The request was approved. The team was assigned to a courier run near the Land of Earth border, escorting a small caravan of medicinal herbs to a mountain town that had been suffering an outbreak of lung fever. The mission, the official report said, would be a simple courier route through a low-traffic mountain pass. It was not a simple courier route through a low-traffic mountain pass. The first sign was the smell. Naruto's head turned a quarter inch as the caravan rounded a switchback into a high, wooded valley. His nostrils flared. The smell of crushed pine needles and horse sweat had given way to something underneath. The iron tang of a great deal of blood spilled in a place where blood was supposed to be uncommon. He raised one hand at his side. The caravan did not see it. Asuma did. Asuma stopped the lead horse. Naruto stepped past the horse, past Asuma, and past the front of the caravan. His cane tapped the rocks as he walked. He carried a cane now. He had taken to walking with one a year before, a slim black thing with a silver knob, even though his body did not require one. He had taken to it because the first time he had carried one in jest, Ino had laughed and called him an old man and patted him on the head, and the next morning he had begun carrying it for the rest of his life. The cane tapped. The boy walked. He stopped at the lip of the next switchback, where the road dropped into a broad gravel clearing surrounded by trees. The clearing was full of men. 24 of them, armed, standing around a row of long iron crates, of the kind that nobody put air holes in unless they were planning to put living things inside. A bloodline trafficking ring. The mountain town and the lung fever were a lure for couriers carrying anything valuable. The caravan, the team, the medicine, all of it had been a bait line for an underground market that had been quietly buying up captured children from the eastern provinces for 3 years. The lead mercenary, a barrel-chested man with a half mask and a Chunin-grade flak vest, lifted a hand. "Drop the herbs, lay down the kids, and the woman in the apron walks away," he said. "Free of charge." Asuma behind Naruto started to move forward, his trench knife sliding into his fists in a flicker of chakra-edged steel. He had crossed half the distance to the lip of the clearing before he realized the boy in front of him had not stopped walking. Naruto descended into the clearing with his cane tapping. The mercenaries' eyes tracked him. They had been told to expect a jonin and 3 genin. They saw a small boy in an orange-collared shirt with a black cane and a bloodless face, and several of them laughed. The barrel-chested Chunin grinned and pulled the pin on the largest of the explosive tag bundles strapped to his belt. He flicked the bundle underhand. It landed at Naruto's feet. The explosion lit the entire ridge. A pillar of orange fire roared into the sky. Pine needles shriveled and turned to ash for 30 paces in every direction. The caravan horse reared. Ino screamed Naruto's name from the road above, and Asuma caught her around the waist to keep her from leaping into the fireball. The flames burned down to a thin black column. Naruto was still walking. Half of his face was gone. Half of his shirt was gone. The cane had survived because he had been holding it at the moment of detonation, and what touched his hand did not burn. His right cheekbone, his right eye, his right ear had all been seared away to white skull. But as he walked, the bone bloomed with black flame, and the flame became muscle, and the muscle became skin. And by the time his sandals reached the gravel, his face was whole again. The shirt did not regenerate. The shirt was just a shirt. He shrugged out of what was left of it, dropped it on the ground, and kept walking in a sleeveless undershirt that had survived the worst of the heat. The mercenaries did not laugh anymore. He stopped 10 paces from the barrel-chested Chunin. "If you are going to die," he said, "do it quietly." The Chunin tried to step backward. His knees would not bend. He stood frozen in place with his mouth open because the small boy had not made a single hand sign and had not channeled a single visible thread of chakra. And yet the air around the clearing had gone heavy in a way the Chunin's body recognized from the worst battlefield of his life, the one he had survived by pretending to be dead in a ditch for 8 hours. Naruto looked at the mercenary crew without raising his voice. A wave of pressure went out from him. It was not chakra. It did not feel like chakra. It felt like the moment in a dream when you realize the predator behind you is older than your bloodline, and your bloodline knows it. 22 of the 24 men in the clearing dropped on the spot. Some of them collapsed face first into the gravel and did not move. Some of them seized and foamed at the mouth and went still. 2 of them, the strongest 2, stayed conscious. They stayed conscious for about 3 seconds longer than the others, and they used those 3 seconds to run, which was the only sane thing anyone had done in the clearing all morning. Naruto raised one hand, his index finger crooked, very slightly, the way a man might beckon a server in a tea house. Both runners stopped in midair as if invisible threads had wrapped around their ankles. They hung above the trees, kicking, screaming. He brought his hand down. They came down with it, into the gravel, in a noise like 2 pumpkins being dropped off a roof. The clearing was silent. He turned to the crates. His cane tapped to each iron lock. Each lock came apart in turn. The lids creaked open. Inside the first crate were 2 children, small, dirty, terrified, eyes wide as moons. Inside the second crate were 3 more. By the time he had opened the 6th crate, Ino had pulled away from Asuma at the lip of the ridge and was running down the slope with her medical kit out and her face wet. She reached him at the 7th crate. She did not look at the bodies. She looked at the children. She climbed into the crate beside them and started checking their pulses and giving them sips of water from her flask. She did not flinch when she pressed past him. She did not flinch when her sleeve brushed his bloodied forearm. She moved around him like a swallow around a tower. He looked down at her for a long, full second, and his face softened a fraction of an inch in a way nobody else on the ridge would have seen. Asuma arrived at his elbow, looking at the corpses, looking at the small boy beside him, looking at the way the boy had positioned his body, even now, between the open crates and the tree line. "How many of these rings are there?" Asuma asked. 28 in this country alone," Naruto answered. He had read 3 intelligence files Inoichi had brought home last month. He had read them once, and then he had recited them back to Inoichi from memory while peeling an apple for Ino. 6 are funded by elements within Iwa. 4 are funded by elements within the land of hot water. The remaining 18 are independent, and the largest of them is run out of a fortress in the western mountains by a man who calls himself the Magistrate, We will dismantle them in time. Today, the children come home. Today, the herbs reach the town. Today is enough." He turned his head. "Asuma-sensei, may I trouble you for a cigarette? You are 12. I do not intend to smoke it." Asuma fished a cigarette out of his pack and handed it over. Naruto walked over to the Chunin at the center of the clearing, set the cigarette between the man's lips, and lit it with a small black flame from the tip of his thumb. The man was already past the point of breathing. The cigarette burned untouched. Naruto stepped away from it and walked back to the crates. "What was that for?" Asuma said low. "A custom of my old country," Naruto said. "A small mercy for the road." He did not elaborate. Asuma did not ask. That night, the team escorted both the medicine and the freed children down the mountain. The town received its medicine. The children were placed in the care of the local temple. Asuma wrote a report. The report passed up the chain of command. By the time it reached Hiruzen's desk, the number of bloodline trafficking rings operating in the Land of Fire had quietly dropped from 28 to 27, and 3 additional cells had self-dissolved across the border in the Land of Earth, with their leadership found tied up in their own meeting rooms by Iwa law enforcement, alive but unable to speak. Hiruzen read the report twice. He set it down. He looked out his window at the village. He picked up his pipe and lit it from a candle on his desk. "Asuma," he said to the empty room, "what have you brought home?" 3 days after that mission ended, an emergency dispatch arrived from the Hidden Mist. It was not, in the official sense, a request for Konoha aid. The Mist did not request anything from Konoha in those years. It was an unofficial whisper passed through a third party, a network of merchants who carried messages alongside their rice and fish. A single line, written on a torn slip of paper: "The Yuki are being hunted to the last. If anyone listens, listen now." Hiruzen Sarutobi was, at heart, a sentimental man. He listened. He also could not officially intervene. The Mist Civil War was an internal Mist matter, and Konoha had its own treaties with the Mizukage's government to maintain. So he did the only thing he could do. He called Asuma to the tower at midnight, slid a sealed scroll across the desk, and said, in a voice flat with what was not on the page, "Team 10 is going on a herb gathering mission to the Land of Waves. The mission paperwork is in the scroll. If they happen to wander off route, if they happen to find themselves in the wrong country, if they happen to bring back several civilian refugees who turn out to be Mist citizens, I will be very surprised. I will accept the surprise." Asuma's cigarette stilled at his mouth. "You are sending Jinin into the Mist." "I am sending one Jinin," Hiruzen said. "You and the other 2 will be along for company." Asuma did not argue. They left at dawn. The Land of Waves passed under them in a single morning. By noon, they had crossed the channel under cover of fog, and the team set foot on the western coast of the Land of Water with their hoods up and their hands inside their cloaks. Shino fanned out a small recon swarm of Kikaichu. Ino's mind reached out in a slow, careful sweep through Inoichi's clan technique, a sweep she had been practicing every night for a year, because her father had told her one day that her mind would be the family heirloom she would carry farthest, and she had taken that seriously. Naruto walked at the front, his cane tapping the wet stones of the coastal path, his eyes on the gray cliffs in the distance. The Yuki survivors, what was left of them, had taken shelter in a sea cave half a mile north of an abandoned fishing village. 12 of them, mostly women and children, 2 elders, 1 injured Chunin who had been escorting them for the past week and had taken a sword to the leg 3 days before. They were starving and they were terrified, and when Naruto walked into their cave with his cloak hood lowered, the injured Chunin lifted a kunai with a hand that was shaking from blood loss. "Lower it," Naruto said. "I am not here to add to your day." The Chunin lowered the kunai. The team set up perimeter. Shino's beetles patrolled the cliffs. Ino warmed broth on a small smokeless brazier and went among the children with the bowls one by one. Asuma watched the sea. Naruto stood at the mouth of the cave and watched the fog. The fog moved. It moved against the wind. He sighed very softly, the way a man sighs at a meal interrupted by a phone call. "Asuma-sensei," he said, "please take Ino and the civilians inland. There is a back exit 30 paces in. The Aburame and I will provide cover." Asuma's eyes went to the fog. He saw what Naruto had seen. He did not argue. He gathered the civilians, slung the injured Chunin over his shoulder, and herded the group toward the rear of the cave. Ino looked back once, just once, and Naruto met her eyes and inclined his head a quarter of an inch, the small bow, the emperor's nod. She nodded back, and she went. The 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist did not send 7 that day. They sent 2. They had sent the 2 who happened to be closest to the western coast on patrol, and they had not expected a confrontation. They had expected to scoop up a handful of fleeing civilians at low cost. Juzo Biwa stepped onto the wet sand outside the cave with the Kubikirabocho resting across his shoulders. He was tall, gaunt, with bandages around the lower half of his face and small black eyes that had seen far too much for one career. Beside him, Raiga Kurosuke crackled with low static, twin lightning sabers humming at his belt. The bandaged, child-sized funeral palanquin he carried slung over his back like a piece of grim luggage. Raiga laughed when he saw the team. "A genin," he said. "Konoha sent a genin and a kid in glasses to babysit my bones. Did you forget which country this is, boy?" Naruto walked out of the cave. His cane tapped the sand. The fog drew back from him in a slow ring as he walked, the way water draws back from the leg of a whiting bird. Raiga's smile drained off his face by inches as the boy approached. Raiga had stood beside Kasame Hoshigaki on 3 different killing fields. Raiga had carried funerals for men twice his weight on his back. Raiga had survived the Bloody Mist purges by being meaner than every other child in his graduation class. Raiga's body, all of his body, told him to step back from this child. He stepped forward instead, because that was the only way he had ever known how to live. He drew his sabers. He raised them in a cross. He poured every ounce of lightning chakra he had into them. Raiten, Ranton no Yoroi, he howled, and the storm answered him. The clouds split open. A column of pure, screaming lightning came down out of the sky directly through Naruto's chest. The sand around the boy fused into a circle of black glass. The shockwave knocked Juzo back 3 steps. Smoke billowed off the spot where the boy had been standing. The smoke cleared. The boy was still standing. He was wearing a small, irritated frown. "My grandmother in the old country," he said, "had a tea kettle that whistled louder than this." Raiga's face did something complicated. Naruto's spine straightened and then unfolded. 8 feet of his body twisted up out of the small frame of the genin in front of them as the Ushi Oni came forward. 4 obsidian-plated spider legs unfolded from his back and braced themselves in the sand. The boy's lower body remained human-shaped, but it stood now on a thorax of black chitin, and the air around him was thick with the cold light, ancient pressure of something that had been worshipped as a mountain god by tribes whose names had been forgotten before the first Hokage was born. Juzo Biwa was a missing nin, an A-rank swordsman, and a former member of the Mist's elite. He had also been a frightened orphan once, in a place that had taught him to never run. He charged. He came in low, fast, and silent, the way a real swordsman comes in. He drove the Kubikirabocho overhand at the boy's neck with the full weight of his shoulders behind it. The blade was 3 feet wide. The cleaver had decapitated 7 feudal lords and 2 summons. It had never failed to bite. Naruto did not move his head. The blade hit his neck. The blade stopped. The Kubikirabocho, which had carved through a battlefield's worth of steel armor and once split a bull shark in half, sat against the side of the boy's throat like a butter knife against a stone counter. The edge folded. Juzo felt the edge fold through his palms. His eyes widened above his bandages. He looked at the boy's face. The boy looked back at him. "Who are you?" Juzo shouted. "I cannot recall every single bug I've stepped on," Naruto answered. Juzo tried to pull the sword back. The sword did not come back. The boy had closed one bare hand around the blade. The steel groaned. Juzo's hand on the hilt began to shake. He tried to release the hilt to draw a tanto. The boy's free hand was suddenly around his wrist. A spider leg came forward from the boy's back. It was a black, segmented, 6-foot lance of chitin that ended in a curved, polished point, and it moved faster than Juzo's eyes could track. It punched through his chest, plate armor and rib and lung and spine, and exited his back in a single arc, dripping a fluid that was not blood. The The fluid was thick and yellow-green, and it came from a gland in the spider leg, and within 2 seconds of entering Juzo Biwa's chest cavity, it began to do its work. Juzo's body did not collapse the way a man's body collapses. It softened. It went from a man's outline into something resembling a glove from which the hand had been removed. By the time Naruto withdrew the leg and let him fall, Juzo Biwa had no recognizable face left. The Kubikiri Bocho hit the sand. Naruto looked at Raiga. Raiga had stopped breathing somewhere in the last 10 seconds. His saber slipped a quarter inch in his hands. He did not run. He could not run. His body had locked. Some part of his brain knew that running would only catch the predator's interest, and another part of his brain knew that not running would not save him either. And the third part of his brain, the only part still working, was screaming at the first 2 parts to make a choice already. Naruto did not move. He looked at Raiga and tilted his head. A pressure went out of him. It was not a conqueror's wave like the one in the gravel clearing. It was a single focused beam. It hit Raiga in the chest and went through him. Every bone in the man's ribcage exploded inward at once. Raiga did not fall straight down. He folded around an invisible fist. He came down on his side in the surf, and the surf went pink, and a sudden silence fell across the beach. The thunderhead overhead drained off in a long sigh of rain. Shino stepped out of the cave mouth behind Naruto with his cloak drawn tight against the wet wind. "I did not intervene," he said. His tone was flat in the way Aburame voices were always flat, but there was a thread of something else under it now. "I judged my intervention would not be useful." "Your judgment was sound." "Naruto." "Yes." "Are we in danger?" "We were never in danger," Naruto said. "But you were correct to ask." He turned and walked back toward the cave. The Ushi-Oni form receded into him in a slow, almost polite withdrawal of legs and chitin, and by the time he reached the cave mouth, he was once again a boy in a wet cloak with a black cane, and the only sign that anything had happened on the beach was the body of a missing nin softening into the surf and another folded around itself in the foam. Asuma met him inside the cave. Asuma had heard the thunder. Asuma had felt the air go still. Asuma had a great many questions and the wisdom to ask none of them. "All clear, Sensei," Naruto said. "We can move." "We move," Asuma agreed. They moved. They escorted the Yuki survivors south along the coast for 2 days, paid a fisherman a great deal of money to ferry them across to the land of waves, and from there walked the survivors north overland to a quiet hamlet in the land of fire, where Hiruzen had prearranged shelter for them through a friend of a friend in the local lord's court. The injured Chunin recovered. The 2 elders settled into small back rooms in the hamlet inn. The children began, after a week, to laugh again. One of the children was a small dark-haired girl with violet eyes who would later be known as Haku Yuki, and who would one day, much later, accept Naruto Uzumaki's offer to apprentice under him in matters that had nothing to do with assassination. That story is for another time. For now, the team came home. They returned to Konoha with a smaller official report than they had filed with the courier mission, and a much larger unofficial story that traveled, by various small mouths, into the ears of every jonin who frequented the same bar that Asuma frequented on Tuesdays, and from there into the ears of every clan head who frequented the same tea house that those jonin frequented on Saturdays. By the end of the month, every serious shinobi in the village had a private name for the boy on Team 10. Most of them avoided saying the name out loud. The ones who did called him the Crown. Hiruzen, hearing the nickname for the first time at a quarterly council meeting, set his pipe down for several seconds before picking it up again. The Chunin exams were announced 6 weeks later. Asuma submitted Team 10 as candidates. The other jonin instructors looked at him as if he had submitted his own throat to a sword. He shrugged and lit another cigarette. "He wants to go," Asuma said. "She wants to go. The Aburame is curious. I trust them." End of discussion. The exams began on a clear morning in late summer, and the first round, a written test administered by Ibiki Morino, was a non-event for Team 10. Naruto turned in a blank paper in the first 30 seconds. When Ibiki called him on it, he pointed out, in his even, polite voice, that the test was designed to eliminate teams whose members could not gather information without being caught. and asked whether Ibiki would prefer he write down the names of every candidate currently cheating in the room. He wrote down the names. He wrote down 41 of them. Ibiki passed him. Ibiki passed the entire team. Ibiki then went into the back room and poured himself a generous serving of the office brandy. The second round began in the forest of death. Anko Mitarashi met the teams at the entrance with her usual flourish, a thrown kunai, a wide grin, a stab at a participant's cheek to demonstrate the lethality of the forest. The kunai she threw at the crowd that morning did not reach the crowd. It stopped in midair 3 feet from her hand. She blinked at it. Naruto, in the front rank, lifted one finger and gently directed the kunai to the ground at her feet. "Pardon me, Mitarashi-san," he said. She prefers her demonstration not to involve sharp objects landing near her face. The she was Ino, who was standing 2 paces behind him. Anko looked at the boy. Anko looked at the kunai. Anko looked at the boy again. Anko then leaned over to Asuma and asked, in a voice she did not bother to lower, "Sarutobi, is that the crown?" Well. She straightened and addressed the candidates. She did not throw any more kunai. The Forest of Death swallowed 44 Genin teams that afternoon. Team 10 moved through the inner ring like a single body. Shino's beetles fanned out in a wide net. Ino's mind monitored the surrounding chakra signatures. Naruto walked at the center, cane tapping. They were attacked twice in the first hour, once by an Ame team, once by a Kusa team, and both attacks ended within 30 seconds without Naruto having needed to draw a kunai. The Ame team had tried a long-range water jutsu. The water had turned to mist before it reached the boy. The Kusa team had tried a sneak attack from above. The Kusa team had landed unconscious in a heap on the forest floor, their scrolls neatly stacked beside them with a small, almost decorous note from Naruto pinned on top. "With thanks." The team kept walking. They reached the central tower with 8 hours to spare. And then the Forest of Death did something it had not done in 19 years. The trees in a 1-kilometer radius behind them began to die. The leaves yellowed. The bark grayed. The undergrowth wilted. The Kikaichu in Shino's hood went still and refused to move. Ino's hand closed around Naruto's sleeve. Asuma, who had been observing from the tower roof, stiffened. A snake the size of an oak tree came up out of the canopy. It came up and up and up until its head loomed 60 feet over the trail behind them. And then it opened its mouth, and 3 more snakes that size came out of its mouth. And then those snakes opened their mouths, and small clouds of even smaller snakes poured out of those. And within a minute, the trail behind Team 10 was a writhing wall of muscle and fang and dead foliage 300 yards long. A figure stepped down from the head of the largest snake. Pale skin, long black hair, yellow eyes that ran the length of him in a single slow slither, a grass nine's headband, a grin that did not belong on any face that had not been wearing it for a very long time. Orochimaru of the Sanin had decided to test the rumor in person. My, he said. His voice had the texture of a wet glove. What an interesting little garden the old man has grown for me. Is it true then? Is it true what they whisper? The crown of Konoha, the yokai child, the new little god in the orange shirt. Naruto turned around. He did so without hurry. He kept Ino behind his right shoulder as he turned. His cane tapped the gravel of the central tower's courtyard. He looked up at the wall of snakes and the pale man on top of the largest of them, and he tilted his head a quarter of an inch. "You experiment with life, serpent," he said, "but you fail to understand the hierarchy of this world." Orochimaru's grin grew wider. "Show me," he whispered. The snakes came down the trail. A wave of fangs and scale and rotted breath came at Team 10 across 100 yards of dying forest in less time than it took for Asuma to drop down off the tower roof. Naruto did not move. He breathed in. He breathed out. He held one hand at his side, palm down. His other hand stayed on his cane. A pressure came out of him. It was not the pressure of the gravel clearing. It was not the pressure of the beach. It was a different pressure, older, slower, like the silence before a great bell is rung. It moved out across the trail in a ring of black and red shimmer that was not chakra and was not killing intent and was not any name the Chunin examiners had on their charts. The snakes met it. They met it the way swimmers meet a wall of ice underwater. The wave of muscle hit the wave of pressure, and the muscle came apart. The first 3 snakes' heads collapsed inward in their own bodies as if their skulls had been crushed by a great invisible boot. The smaller snakes inside them began to thrash and tear at one another, driven mad by an instinct older than language, the instinct that says, do not approach a predator larger than your bloodline can comprehend. The wall of snakes ate itself, the forest filled with the sound of fang on fang. Within a minute, the trail behind Team 10 was a heaving mass of self-cannibalizing serpents, every one of them attacking the snake next to it. Because that snake was not the boy in the orange shirt and could therefore be reached, Orochimaru's grin slipped half an inch. "Oh," he breathed. "Oh, that is delicious." He flickered. He vanished from the head of the largest snake, and he reappeared in the air directly above Naruto's shoulder with his neck already extended. His face elongated like a serpent's. His fangs descended. He drove his mouth at the boy's throat, intending to plant a curse mark and walk away with a souvenir. Naruto looked up at him. That was all. He looked up. An invisible, focused blast went up out of his eyes. It was not a beam of light. It was not a shockwave of chakra. It was a verdict given in pure, distilled will. Orochimaru's right shoulder and right arm and the right half of his ribcage ceased to exist in a single sound, a high, sharp crack that echoed off the tower walls and made every Chunin examiner on the roof flinch in unison. Orochimaru hit the ground 20 feet away and rolled to a stop, missing a quarter of his body. He stayed there for a second, his remaining hand pressed against the dirt. His yellow eyes were wide for the first time in a great many years. He looked at the boy. He laughed. He laughed, and the laugh had blood in it. "Magnificent," he wheezed. "Oh, you wonderful little monster. You wonderful little nightmare in an orange collar. We will meet again, Crown. We will meet very soon. I cannot wait to study what you—" A second pressure came down. The earth around him cratered. Orochimaru sank into the ground in a coil of pale flesh and a flash of yellow eye, the way a snake disappears into a pond, and he was gone before the second pressure could finish its descent. The snakes he had brought, what was left of them, fell over dead. The forest around the tower stood for a moment in absolute hush. Ino's hand was still on Naruto's sleeve. He looked down at her hand. He set his own hand over hers for a single beat. Then he let go. "Inside," he said. They went inside. The Hokage's office, 2 hours later, was a great deal more crowded than usual. Hiruzen sat behind his desk. Anko Mitarashi sat in a chair in the corner with her elbows on her knees and her face in her hands. Asuma stood at the window. Ibiki stood by the door. The entire Jonin Council had been summoned and was currently being briefed in dry, unsparing language by Asuma on the events of the second exam. Hiruzen, who had aged 5 years in the last 3 hours, lit his pipe with a slightly unsteady hand and looked across the desk at the small boy seated in the visitor's chair. "Orochimaru," he said. "I drove him off," Naruto said. "I did not finish him. He fled into the earth. He is missing approximately 26% of his physical mass. His left side is intact. He will attempt to rebuild and to retreat to one of his hideouts. He will be vulnerable for the next 72 hours, and after that he will be a great deal more careful with his life. If the village would like me to handle the matter, I will do so during the second phase of the finals, when I would otherwise be at leisure." Hiruzen took a long drag on his pipe. "You would like to handle a Sannin?" "He damaged my home, Lord Third. He frightened the woman I care for." There was a small, almost soundless gasp from Asuma at the window. Hiruzen looked at the boy for a very long second. He set the pipe down. He picked it up. He set it down again. He did not, in the end, give an answer that night. He did, however, write a personal note to himself before he went to bed, on the back of an old letter from his late wife, which he kept in his desk drawer. The note said, he referred to a 9-year-old as the woman he cares for. "Investigate this. Tread softly." The finals were held in the great stadium of the Hokage Mountain. The crowd that day filled the stands to the rafters. Feudal lords, council members, visiting dignitaries from the land of wind and the land of snow and the land of tea, half the Jonin of Konoha, most of the Anbu, a delegation from the Sand Village led, ostensibly, by their Kazekage. The brackets had been drawn 3 weeks before, and most of the names on them had drawn polite interest at best. One name had drawn something else. Naruto Uzumaki's name had been entered in a special exhibition slot at the request of the Hokage himself, and his opponent had been selected from a pool of candidates volunteered by the visiting nations. The candidate, in the end, had been the Saint Jaygarcia, the sensei of the Kazekage's 3 children, a tall, scarred wind specialist with a long blade and a longer reputation. The official reason for the exhibition had been cultural exchange. The unofficial reason had been that the Sand delegation had asked, with a smile that did not reach their eyes, whether they might see the famous crown of Konoha in action. Hiruzen had agreed. Hiruzen had also tripled the Anbu presence on the stadium roof. Naruto walked into the arena alone. He wore a high-collared black coat that Inoichi's wife had sewn for him 3 months earlier, a coat with mother-of-pearl buttons and a stiff, formal cut. He carried his cane. He did not wear his forehead protector, which was tied around his upper arm instead, because the forehead protector did not, he had once observed, suit the face he wore in this lifetime. Baki walked out from the other end of the arena. He was nervous. He hid it well. He had been told that the boy was a prodigy. He had assumed that the briefing was a polite overstatement, the way visiting dignitaries always overstate the talent of their own youth. He looked across the sand at the boy. The boy looked back at him. Baki's nervousness went from a low simmer to an alarm bell ringing in the back of his skull. The proctor raised a hand and dropped it. Baki moved first. He had to. He was a wind specialist, and against an opponent of unknown range, the first move was always to establish space and pressure. He performed 3 hand signs in a sequence so fast it looked, to the layperson in the crowd, like a single ripple of his fingers. A blade of compressed air formed at his palm and snapped out across the arena floor in a low arc. Futen, Kazekiri. The blade reached Naruto in under a heartbeat. The boy did not dodge. He stepped very slightly to the left. The way a man steps to let a server pass at a banquet, the wind blade clipped his right arm. It clipped it off above the elbow. The arm fell into the sand. The crowd inhaled in a single sharp gasp. Up in the stands, Ino Yamanaka shot to her feet with a small cry of her name in her throat. Inoichi caught her wrist before she could vault the railing. Naruto looked at his fallen arm. He looked up at Ino. His smile was a small smile, a fractional smile. The corner of his mouth lifted by maybe the width of a coin. It was meant only for her. The angle of his head was timed precisely for her line of sight, and the smile reached his eyes for a single beat, the way warmth reaches a window in early spring. She froze with her hand against her mouth. Inoichi felt beside her his daughter's entire heart rate change. Naruto turned back to Baki. "Your wind is sharp," he said, "but your existence is dull." The stump of his right arm bloomed with black flame. The flame moved. The flame curled. The flame coalesced. A new arm formed inside the flame, knit itself from the shoulder down, fingers regrew, knuckles formed, and within 6 seconds, Naruto's right hand was flexing at his side in a small, dismissive shakeout of a regenerated limb. The arm in the sand crumbled into black flakes. A pentagram bloomed on the arena floor. It was wide. It was old. It was etched in the same burning black lines as the one that had been etched into the corridor beneath Konoha 4 years before. The sand inside its lines burned to glass. The air over the arena went thick. The sky overhead, which had been a clean, soft late summer blue, darkened by half a shade as if a curtain had been drawn across the sun. Baki's mouth opened. He raised his hands to perform another sequence. He did not finish. Naruto's spine straightened. The Ushi Oni came forward in full. This time, it was not a half shift. It was not the partial form he had used on the beach. It was the entire transformation, the full and complete and ancient shape of the demonic spider bull that had once terrorized a different sea on a different world. And the form towered over the arena floor at the height of a 2-story building. 8 spider legs braced themselves in the sand. The pentagram lit up. A pair of curling bull's horns rose from the temple of the now massive humanoid torso at the center. The boy's face was still recognizable, but it was the face of a king sitting at the heart of a war chariot of his own flesh. His eyes were 2 hot coals. The crowd in the stadium did not scream. The crowd in the stadium did not move. The crowd in the stadium remembered, in a single collective instinctive jolt, that they were small mammals on a small rock in a very large universe, and that there were older things than them watching the small mammals at all times. Baki moved. He had to move. He had been trained for 30 years to never freeze in front of an enemy. He flickered to his right at the speed of a top-tier jonin. He performed 3 hand signs in midair. He gathered the air pressure in his lungs for a single focused wind bullet that he intended to drive into the boy's center mass. Naruto's leg moved. It was a single spider leg. It came forward in a flash of black chitin, too fast for the human eye to track. It met Baki halfway through his flicker step. It hooked him around the chest. It pinned him against the stadium wall in the next eye blink. His back hit the stone hard enough to leave a print. Baki's hands came up to form a final sign. The venom was already in him. The point of the spider leg, which had pinned him against the wall, had broken his outer armor and pressed a single thin drop of fluid into the hollow above his sternum. The venom had crossed the threshold of his skin and entered his chakra network in the next half second, and now his hands would not move. He stared at his own hands and willed them to perform the seal sequence, and his hands sat at his sides like the hands of a doll. Naruto's voice came down from above him. It was deeper now, low and slow, the voice of the larger form, but it was the same voice underneath. "You will live," he said. "You will not perform a jutsu again. Your network is closed. Your body is intact. Your sister and your nephews are well, and they will continue to be well, provided your country remembers to behave itself. Tell your Kazekage." The leg withdrew. Baki slid down the wall and slumped at its base, his eyes wide, his fingers twitching, his nervous system intact, but locked in a permanent half shudder from the chakra system upward. He would walk again. He would speak again. He would never throw a wind blade again. The Ushi Oni form folded itself back into the boy on the arena floor in a slow, almost graceful collapse of legs and chitin. The pentagram dimmed. The boy in the black coat picked up his cane from the sand and tapped it once against the ground. He looked up at the Hokage's box. He inclined his head a precise quarter-inch. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, and the entire stadium remained absolutely still until he had left the field. The Hokage's box did not stay still for long. The Kazekage in the box leaned across the railing toward Hiruzen. "Your son," the Kazekage said. "Genin," Hiruzen said. "Genin." The two men looked at each other. They both knew in that look that the Kazekage was not the Kazekage. The Kazekage was Orochimaru, with his shoulder regrown by means that did not bear describing in polite company, wearing the Sand Leader's face like a mask and the Sand Leader's robes like a costume. Hiruzen had suspected it for an hour. The Kazekage knew that Hiruzen suspected. Both of them had been waiting for a single specific signal from the field below, which would have triggered an invasion, the seizure of the village, and the death of the third Hokage. The signal had been Baki's victory. Baki had not won. Baki was currently being carried off the arena floor on a stretcher with his nervous system politely closed. The Kazekage's hands, hidden in the long sleeves of his robes, did not move. The Kazekage's mouth did not move. The Kazekage said, after a very long pause, "We have perhaps much to discuss in private." "Perhaps," Hiruzen said. A signal, however, had already been given. It had been given before the match started. It had been given to the Sanjinchuriki, the youngest son of the previous Kazekage, the boy with the red hair and the dark rings under his eyes, who carried within him the one-tailed beast of the sand. The boy had been told 2 days before that at a certain hour of the finals, regardless of what happened in the arena, he was to transform and tear down the walls of the village. The boy was, at that hour, hidden in a high alcove of the stadium's outer ring. He stood up. He walked to the railing. He looked down at the village below him. He felt, in his chest, the ancient, hungry, mad voice of the sand spirit Shukaku, the one-tail, urging him forward in a chorus of half-whispered names and half-remembered insults. He had been told his whole life that he was the proof of his father's love. He had been told that proof in the language of unhealable wounds. He felt very little. He felt mostly the desire to be felt. He raised both arms. The transformation began. Sand poured out of the gourd on his back in a torrent. Sand rose around him. Sand built up in the shape of legs, of a torso, of a 100-foot head topped with 2 upright ears. The sand shape grew and grew and grew until it had stepped out of the high alcove of the stadium and into the street outside, and the entire village below knew, in a single second, that the one tail had come to walk among them. Inside the stadium, the invasion proper began. Sound Nan poured out from the audience. Genjutsu fell across the rear of the crowd. A wall of feathers swept the front rows. Hiruzen leapt up to face Orochimaru, who shed his Kazekage costume like a snake shedding its skin. Anko, Kakashi, Guy, Asuma, every jonin in the building moved at once. But the tailed beast was loose in the city. A great roar split the air over Konoha. Buildings shook. A market stall collapsed in the central square. The southern gate creaked on its hinges. The civilians below the stadium screamed and ran. Naruto Uzumaki, who had just stepped out of the arena tunnel into the cool shadow of the back hall, paused. He listened to the roar. He set his cane against the wall. He removed his black coat with the mother-of-pearl buttons and folded it. He set it on top of his cane. He turned back toward the tunnel and walked, not ran, toward the wall of the stadium, and at the wall he leapt. He cleared the stadium wall in a single bound. He cleared the outer ring of the stadium in a second bound. He landed on a rooftop a block away from the one-tail and tilted his head up at the monster. Shukaku, in the great tower of sand and bone and madness that was his temporary body, lowered his enormous yellow eye and looked down at the small figure on the rooftop. Ha! The tailed beast roared. A roach! A little roach in black! I will crush you and drink your blood, and a beast made of sand, Naruto said. How fleeting. He extended one hand. A wave of Conqueror's haki swept up out of him in a half-dome of red-black shimmer. The dome reached the one-tail's outstretched paw and did not stop it, because tailed beasts were not mortal animals and could not be felled by the will of a mortal being, however ancient, alone. The dome did, however, stagger the beast. Shukaku's massive head reeled, and his swing went wide, and his next swing slowed by a hair, because for the first time in centuries, something was pushing back at his madness. With a steadier madness of its own, Naruto did not wait for an opening. He shifted. The Ushi Oni came forward, full size, full mass, 2 stories of armored chitin and twin curling horns and 8 spider legs that braced themselves on the rooftops of 3 different buildings at once. The boy at the center of the form lifted his face to the tailed beast above him, and the eyes of the form burned the color of a furnace door left open. He leapt. The leap took him 50 feet up into the air, and he caught the side of the tailed beast's flank, 8 spider legs digging into the sand armor at once. The legs drove deep. The legs pumped venom. The venom was not a venom designed for living tissue. The venom was a venom that had been refined over centuries against creatures of pure chakra and pure spirit. It went into Shukaku's sand body, and it found Gaara's network at the core of the sand body, and it slid past Gaara's network into the deep, raging coil of tailed beast chakra at the heart of the construct. Shukaku screamed. It was not a scream of pain. Tailed beasts could not feel pain in the human sense. It was a scream of being suppressed, of being shoved bodily back into a child's body, of being told no by a will that did not flinch. The sand armor came apart. It came apart not in an explosion, but in a long, slow, downward fall, as if a sandcastle had been left out in the rain. The 100-foot tower of Shukaku crumbled in a slow waterfall of grit, layer by layer, paw by paw, head by head. The civilians beneath it had time to run clear. The buildings beneath it sustained minor damage. By the time the dust settled in the street, what remained of the tailed beast was a small boy with red hair lying in a depression of sand at the center of the road, breathing shallowly, his pupils gone wide and shocked. Naruto, in his full Ushi-Oni form, lowered himself to the street. He folded the form back inward as he descended, until he was the boy in the white shirt again, and he walked over to Gaara on the sand and looked down at him. Gaara looked up. Gaara had not been looked down at for most of his life by a person who did not want him dead. "You are afraid," Naruto said. Yes," Gaara whispered. His voice was raw. The tailed beast in his belly was crouching against the back wall of its cage, refusing to come forward. "Of you?" "Wrong question." What was the question?" "Whether you are loved." Gaara's face did something Gaara had not let it do in 12 years. It crumpled, very slightly at the corners in a way that no person in his village had been allowed to see. "You will not die today," Naruto said. "You will return home to your sister and brother. Your sister loves you. She has loved you the entire time. She has not known how to say it because you have made it dangerous to say it. Make it less dangerous and she will say it. You may consider this a gift from me, a small one." He turned and walked away. He left Gaara alive in the sand depression. He left Shukaku suppressed in Gaara's belly. He walked back the way he had come, 8 blocks to the stadium, and as he walked, every sand and sound nin on the rooftops above the street took one look at the boy below and turned and ran in the opposite direction. None of them were caught that day. None of them were pursued. Hiruzen had given orders before the day began that retreating invaders were to be allowed to retreat because the message would travel farther on living lips than on corpses. Back in the stadium, Hiruzen had Orochimaru in a Reaper death seal halfway formed. Orochimaru's 3 Sound 4 bodyguards had erected a barrier around the rooftop fight. The Sannin had been on the verge of taking the third soul along with his own, which had been his plan since before the day began. Naruto walked into the stadium. He looked up at the rooftop barrier. He sighed. The barrier did not hold him out. The barrier was a 4-corner construct sustained by 4 chakra signatures. He walked through one of the corners by closing one hand around the wrist of the Sound 4 member, maintaining it, and her wrist crumpled, and the corner fell. He stepped onto the rooftop with the Hokage and the Sannin both mid-jutsu. The Reaper behind Hiruzen flickered. Orochimaru's snake arms paused. "Lord Third," Naruto said, "cancel the seal." Hiruzen, who had been a heartbeat away from giving his life to take Orochimaru's, looked the boy. He canceled the seal. The Reaper drained back into him. Hiruzen sagged. Asuma was at his side in an instant, easing him down to the rooftop tile. Orochimaru's arms recoiled and his face turned and his yellow eyes met Naruto's eyes across the rooftop, and for a single, full breath, the two of them looked at each other. Then Orochimaru smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just understood that he had bet his entire life savings on a horse that was about to come in second. "Run," Naruto said. Orochimaru ran. The barrier fell. The Sound 4 scattered. The Sannin disappeared into the rooftops with what remained of his elite, and the invasion of Konoha collapsed behind him in a slow, ragged retreat that left 43 of his forces dead, 3 of his lieutenants captured, and his 3-year plan in pieces. Naruto knelt beside Hiruzen. The old man's face was gray. His chakra had dipped to a thread. He had spent a great deal of himself preparing the Reaper. "Lord Third, Naruto, you should not have intended to die today. You should not have intended to make it unnecessary. And yet, Hiruzen managed a small, dry laugh. The laugh became a cough. Asuma slid an arm under his father's shoulders. Naruto rose to his feet and looked out across the stadium, at the dust over the city, at the smoke rising from the southern gate where the One Tail had clipped a watchtower on its way down. The village was alive. The village would mend. The village was alive because of him, in a way it could not, would not, and possibly should not say out loud. He turned. He looked at the rooftops where Orochimaru had gone. He stepped off the stadium's edge. The aftermath of the invasion lasted 3 days. 3 days of cleanup, of funerals, of council sessions, of medic teams running between makeshift hospitals. 3 days of Hiruzen in his sickbed, refusing to retire, dictating reorganization orders through his son. 3 days of Inoichi and the Yamanaka clan interrogating Sound prisoners with a precision that even by the standards of his clan was unusual, because Inoichi had personally watched the One Tail come down out of the sky in the next street over from his flower field. And Inoichi was no longer in a forgiving mood. On the morning of the 4th day, Naruto Uzumaki walked into the Hokage's office with his cane. Hiruzen was propped up against 3 pillows behind his desk. Asuma was at the window. Jiraiya of the Sannin, who had returned to the village 2 days earlier with a face that nobody had ever seen Jiraiya wear, was leaning against the bookshelf with his arms folded. "Lord Third," Naruto said, "I have a request. Speak. I will leave the village for 72 hours. I will return. I require no team. I require no support. I require only that you sign off on the absence in the official record as a personal training journey." Hiruzen's eyes did not flicker. "Orochimaru, he is wounded. He is fleeing west toward his sound base in the land of rice. He has 6 of his elite with him. He intends to use them as shields and rebuild his body in the next 72 hours. After that, he will be a great deal more careful with his life. I would prefer not to wait. I prefer that the man who frightened the woman I care for be removed from the list of people permitted to do so sooner rather than later. Asuma, at the window, exhaled slowly. Jiraiya, at the bookshelf, said, "Hokage-ai." "Sit down, Jiraiya," Hiruzen said. Jiraiya sat down. Hiruzen looked at the boy in front of his desk. He looked at the cane in the boy's hand. He looked at the small, polite curve of the boy's mouth. "You will return. Yes, you will not die." "I cannot, Lord Third. Not in any way that would inconvenience the village." "Then go." Naruto inclined his head. He turned and walked out of the office. He went down the stairs of the Hokage Tower. He stopped on the ground floor at the entrance of the building because Ino Yamanaka was waiting for him there, leaning against the doorpost with her arms folded and her hair pulled back, her eyes red around the edges from 3 days of poor sleep. She straightened when she saw him. "Where are you going?" "West." "For how long?" 3 days. "Why? He frightened you." She opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at him for a long second, and then she stepped forward and pressed her forehead against the front of his coat where the mother-of-pearl buttons were, and she stayed there for the count of 4. She did not cry. She did not speak. Her hands stayed at her sides. She just stood there with her forehead on his coat, and she breathed. He set one hand against the back of her head. He kept it there for the count of 4. "I will return," he said. "You will, or I will follow you." "I do not doubt you, Ino." He stepped back. He walked out of the tower. The sun was high and white, and the village around him was rebuilding itself in small, steady waves of carpenters and stretcher bearers and tile layers. And he walked through it with his cane tapping, and at the western gate the guards let him pass without a word. He covered the distance to the border in 9 hours. He covered the distance from the border to the foothills of the land of rice in another 11. He moved at a pace no normal shinobi could have sustained, and he did so with the air around him cooling slightly as he passed, and the wildlife in the trees falling silent behind him in long, expanding circles. He stopped twice for water. He did not stop for food. He arrived at the wasteland on the far side of the foothills on the second morning, and at the center of the wasteland, in a circle of dead trees, he found the man he had come for, with his lieutenants in a loose ring around him. Orochimaru's regeneration had reached his shoulder. His arm was a thin, half-grown thing of pale muscle hanging at his side. He was using one of his sound four to anchor a chakra circulation seal designed to speed the rebuild. He had been planning to remain in this wasteland for 30 more hours. He had not planned to be found in 20. The sound four turned. Kimimaro Kaguya, the foremost of them, stepped forward. He was a tall, pale boy with green markings on his forehead and bones beneath his skin that could be drawn out at will. He had been Orochimaru's most loyal lieutenant for 3 years. He believed, with the absolute conviction of a man who had been raised in a cage, that his master's dream was the only good thing in the world. "You will not pass me," Kimimaro said. "I will protect Lord Orochimaru's dream." Naruto looked at him. His eyes caught an eerie, demonic light at the edges, the kind of light that, in another century, on another sea, had been the last thing a great many sailors had seen. "I have lived a long time," he said. "Human lives are but a fleeting moment. Your devotion is wasted on garbage." Kimimaro's hands came up. The bones in his arms came out. He performed his bone pulse. A hail of dozens of bone projectiles sprang across the wasteland from his palms, each one as sharp as a finished kunai. Naruto walked into the hail. The bones met his skin and broke. Haki, the same dark coating he had used to grip the Kubikira Bocho without bleeding, lay over his arms and chest and face. The bones broke against it. The bones came apart in white powder. Kimimaro's eyes widened. He drew his spine. He used his spine as a whip. The whip cracked against Naruto's shoulder, and the whip itself fractured. Kimimaro stumbled back, and Naruto closed the distance, and Naruto's open palm came down on Kimimaro's chest. A wave of Conqueror's haki, focused, narrow, the kind that only the strongest could direct at a single target, went out of Naruto's hand and into Kimimaro's body. Every curse mark on every member of the Sound Four activated at once. Every curse mark instantly burned out because the seals could not contain the pressure that was being forced through them from the outside. The 4 lieutenants behind Kimimaro convulsed. 3 of them dropped on the spot. The 4th, Tayuya, managed to crawl backwards 6 feet before her body locked up. Kimimaro looked up at the boy. The bone in his chest had cracked along his sternum. His eyes were wet. The disease he had been suffering for 3 years had been kept at bay by Orochimaru's experiments, and the burnout of his curse mark had let the disease forward. My dream, he whispered. Your dream, Naruto said, was a man's lie. You are dying. You have been dying for some time. He has been lying to you about its cure. There is a hospital on the eastern slope, 2 miles down. The medics there will keep you alive for another 5 months. Use them as you see fit. Go. Pretend you have never met him, and you will live to bury him. Kimimaro looked at him. Kimimaro did the math. Kimimaro stood up with the worst kind of empty eyes a young man could have. The eyes of a man who has been told that his god has been picking his pockets for years, and he walked off east toward the slope, and the boy with the cane did not look back at him. Naruto turned to the center of the dead grove. Orochimaru, who had spent the last 10 seconds attempting to slither down into the earth, found that the earth would not open under him. The conqueror's pressure in the grove had a shape to it. The shape included the ground. Naruto walked across the grove. He reached the Sannin in 9 paces. He lifted Orochimaru by the throat. The Sannin was not a small man. The boy in front of him was, by birth height, 4 feet 11 inches. The boy lifted Orochimaru off his feet with one hand and held him there at eye level as if the weight were a child's toy. You disturbed the peace of my home, Naruto said. Orochimaru's mouth opened. His half-grown arm scrabbled at the boy's wrist. His snakes came forward out of his sleeves, and as the snakes left his skin, they fell over dead, because being near the boy's wrist was being near a power that snakes could not abide. You frightened the woman I care for, Naruto said. A spider leg unfolded from the boy's back, just one. It came forward over his shoulder and touched the side of Orochimaru's skull, right behind the ear, and a single thin drop of venom slid down the chitin and into the bone of the Sannin's cranium and through the bone into the soft tissue beneath. The venom found its way to Orochimaru's cerebral cortex in less than a second. Orochimaru did not die. Orochimaru's chakra network closed permanently. His motor control closed permanently. His upper brain functions closed permanently. His autonomic nervous system, however, kept his heart beating and his lungs working, because Naruto had been precise about which threads to sever and which to leave open. The man who had spent 50 years trying to escape death by stealing other people's bodies was reduced, in 3 seconds, to a body he could not leave and could not use. He hung from the boy's hand. His eyes lost their yellow. His mouth went slack. A line of drool ran down the corner of his chin. Naruto looked at him for a long, full breath. You wanted to live forever, he said. Live. He set Orochimaru down on the dead grass. The Sannin sat there in a heap, blinking slowly, his head listing to one side. He was alive. He would be alive for as long as someone fed him. He would not move on his own. He would not speak. He would not perform a hand sign. He would, in time, be picked up by the Sound's last surviving subordinates, who would take him back to one of his bases and care for him out of misguided loyalty for the rest of his life, until they realized he had nothing left to give them and abandoned him in a back room of one of his fortresses, where he would die 30 years later of pneumonia, in a body that had never known what year it was for any of those years. Naruto turned and walked out of the grove. He covered the distance home in 18 hours. He arrived at the western gate of Konoha on the morning of the 4th day. The guards saluted him without quite meeting his eyes. He walked through the streets. The streets were mending. Shops had reopened. A pair of children chased each other across a bridge. A pigeon landed on a fence and tilted its head at him. He went directly to the Yamanaka flower field. Ino was kneeling in the south plot, planting bell-shaped flowers along the new fence that her father had put in after the invasion. She looked up as the gate swung open. She saw him at the gate. She did not gasp this time. She rose to her feet, brushed her hands on her apron, and walked over to him through the rows of color. She stopped 2 paces from him. She looked at him. She looked at his coat for blood. There was no blood on his coat. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would." 3 days, you said. It was 3 days and 4 hours. You're late. I am sorry. She stepped forward. She slid her arms around his middle and pressed her cheek against the front of his coat where the mother-of-pearl buttons were. She held him for a long count this time. 16, maybe 20. He set one hand against the back of her head and one hand against the small of her back, and the wind moved across the flower field, and the bees moved across the rows, and nothing on the entire continent that day was strong enough to enter that gate without his permission. After a long while, she stepped back. She did not let go of his sleeve. "Did you finish what you went for?" "I did." "Will he come back?" "He cannot." "Good, good." She tugged him toward the porch. "There's soup," she said. "Mother made it. It's gone cold, but I'll warm it." "Yes." They walked toward the porch. Behind them, somewhere on the rooftops of the village, an Ambu operative made a small notation in a small black book and lowered his binoculars. The notation read, "Subject returned, 4 hours late, in good condition, with no debriefing required." Below the notation, the operative drew by his own hand a small circle around the words "the Crown." The Crown was home. The Crown sat at a porch table and ate soup with a girl who had soil on her cheek. 2 streets away, in his office, Hiruzen Sarutobi received the latest dispatch from the western border, set it down on his desk, and lit his pipe with a hand that was steadier than it had been in 5 years. The dispatch reported a single certain piece of news. Orochimaru of the Sanin had been seen, alive, in a fortress in the land of rice. He was being fed by his own subordinates. He had not spoken a word in days. He was, by all accounts, a drooling husk. Hiruzen read the dispatch twice. He set it down. He looked out his window, past the rebuilding streets, past the southern gate where the one tail had clipped the watchtower, past the rooftops of the Yamanaka compound, where, if he squinted, he could see the small orange shape of a boy at a porch table. He took a long, slow drag on his pipe. Across the continent that month, in 7 hidden places, men who had been planning very specific things for very specific dates began, one by one, to read the dispatches from the land of fire and to revise their plans. A man with red clouds on his cloak set down a copy of the Konoha invasion report at a meeting in a cave somewhere south of the land of waterfalls, and tapped one finger against the table. "The crown of Konoha," he said. His voice was a low rasp under a high collar. "We will need to be very careful with the QB container." Beside him, a tall man with shark blue skin and a row of jagged teeth grinned. "Sounds like fun, Itachi." Across the table, a figure in an orange mask tilted his head, and the eye hole of the mask narrowed in a way that was not by any usual measure the way an eye hole was supposed to narrow. "He has lived this life before," the masked man said. "I would know that signature anywhere. Then he will know yours in time." "Yes." "And the Yamanaka girl." "Yes." "He moves to protect her. Then we move when she is not within his sight." The men in the cave looked at one another. Outside the cave, the rain fell in long, slow ropes through the trees. Far to the south, in a flower field outside a healing village, a boy and a girl ate soup at a porch table, and the boy reached, after a long while, across the table to take the girl's hand, and held it there for the rest of the meal. He had returned. The garden was safe. 2 years moved across the village the way water moves across stone, smoothing the edges of what the invasion had broken and leaving the deeper shapes untouched. Roofs were patched. The southern watchtower came back up out of new timber and new stone, taller than before. Naruto Uzumaki turned 14 and then 15. He grew exactly 4 inches in that time, which was less than Ino had grown, and she made a small ritual of measuring him against the door frame of the Yamanaka kitchen every other month and announcing the verdict aloud, while he stood there with his cane in one hand and an expression of long-suffering patience that he wore only for her. Team 10 became the most requested squad in the village. This was a matter of record in the assignment book on Hiruzen's desk. Asuma Sarutobi turned up to the morning briefings with a cigarette already half burned and a list of refused contracts that had grown longer than the list of accepted ones. because the lord of this province and the lord of that province and the merchant guild of yet another province all wanted the Sarutobi squad with the boy in the black coat, and the village could only field that squad so often before Asuma began to suspect that his own knees were going to give out before the demand did. Ino, 15 now, and a head taller than the child who had once knelt in the dirt with a smudge on her cheek, ran the operations side of the team like a junior chunin who had been doing the work for decades, which she had, in a sense, since she had been managing her father's clan paperwork since she was 11. Shino moved through every mission the way he had always moved, hooded, watchful, and indispensable for reasons most observers never saw until afterward, when they counted the casualties and noticed the count was 0. Naruto walked at the center of all of it with his cane tapping. The black coat with the mother-of-pearl buttons had been let out twice by Inoichi's wife as he grew, and the buttons themselves had been reset on a new lining the last time, and the coat now had the look of a piece of clothing that had been worn into the shape of its owner rather than the other way around. He had begun wearing his forehead protector on his bicep over a thin wrap of cloth, the way an officer wears a regimental band. The whisker marks on his cheeks had faded a shade, the way the village's first impression of him had faded a shade, into something more permanent and harder to name. The crown was now a word that older shinobi said into their drinks. The newer ones said it out loud at the bar. Civilians said it with both hands wrapped around their teacups, the way one says the name of a local guardian spirit who had been seen pulling a child out of a river once and was now assumed to be watching the river full time. He did not mind the name. He preferred it in some private corner of him to the name his birth certificate carried, because the name on the certificate had been written by a father he could not remember and a mother he could not remember. And the name the village had given him had been chosen by people who had watched him walk into fire and walk back out again, and decided, on their own, what to call what they had seen. On the morning his second arc of life began, he was sitting on the porch of the Yamanaka house with a bowl of rice between his hands and a sparrow on the railing in front of him. Anno was at the well in the yard, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back in a knot that had come loose at the temple. She was washing a pile of herbs Inoichi had cut at dawn, and she was singing a working song under her breath, the kind of song her mother had taught her without ever sitting down to teach her, which is the only way that kind of song is ever passed on. Naruto watched her the way he watched the sparrow, his head turned a quarter inch. A bird had come into the yard from over the south wall. It was a hawk rather than a sparrow, and it carried a slip of paper on its leg, and the slip of paper was sealed with a red wax mark that he recognized from a personal correspondence he had read once over Inoichi's shoulder a year ago. It was a Hokage seal, and a particular kind of Hokage seal, the kind that was used when the Hokage was speaking only as a man and never as an office. The hawk landed on the railing beside the sparrow. The sparrow flew off. Naruto unfastened the slip of paper. He read it. He folded it and tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat. Ino looked up from the well. She had felt his attention shift the way she felt a change in the weather these days, somewhere in the small of her back. "Trouble," she said. "A request. From the old man?" "From the man, yes. The office sent nothing." She set the herbs down on the rim of the well. She wiped her hands on the front of her apron. She walked across the yard to the porch and sat down on the step next to his knee, looking up at him the way she had looked up at him the first day he had ever crossed her gate, with her chin tilted and her eyes uncovering him by degrees. "How long?" she said. "Hours. Perhaps the rest of the morning. Then I'll keep the rice warm. Thank you." He stood, he set the empty bowl on the porch table. He bent his head and pressed his lips for the count of one breath to the crown of her head where the hair had come loose. He had taken to doing this in the last year. He did it the way a man pays a small toll at a gate before passing through, a recognition that the gate is there and the toll is willingly given. He stepped down off the porch and crossed the yard and went through the gate, and the hawk on the railing fluffed its feathers once and stayed where it was. because the message had been delivered and the messenger had been given a bowl of grain in payment for its trip. Hiruzen's note had been short. It had said only, "The old hawk is moving. Come at once. Tell no one." Naruto knew the old hawk in the village by name. He had known the old hawk in the village by name since he was 8 years old and had walked down an unmarked staircase into a corridor that smelled of iron and bleach. He had not forgotten the bandages on the right arm. He remembered the implanted Sharingan in the limb. He remembered the order given in the tone a man uses to draw a bath. He had, in fact, set aside that memory the way a craftsman sets aside a half-finished piece of work on his bench to be returned to when the time came. The time had come. He crossed the village rooftops at a pace that, to the few jonin who saw him pass, registered as a flicker of black coat and the brief impression of a cane. He reached the Hokage Tower in under 3 minutes. He came in through the rear window of the office because the front of the tower was being watched, and the watching had a flavor he recognized. Hiruzen was at his desk. His hair was whiter than it had been 2 years ago. His hands were thinner. His eyes were the same eyes they had always been, lit from underneath by a fire that had outlasted 3 wars and a dozen treaties. Asuma stood at the door. He had a Chunin guard's vest on over his usual sash, and his trench knives were already at his hips with the chakra threads pre-tied, which meant he had been told something he had been forbidden to put in the letter. "He is in the western quarter," Hiruzen said. "He has reactivated 41 of his sleepers. He has positioned a strike team within the Ambu rotation to take this tower at the 3rd bell. He believes you are at the border. He believes you have been at the border for 2 days. The forged mission scroll was passed up through 3 layers of falsified channels and would have fooled any office in this country except mine." "How did it not fool yours?" "Because I have made it my business for the last 2 years to know exactly where you are at all times. I owe the village that much." "You owe the village a great deal more, Lord Third, and you have given it." Hiruzen waved this off with a hand that had grown thin enough to see the bones in. "He intends to take this office, end me, and install a council of his choosing within the day. He has prepared 3 replacement Hokage candidates. He believes the village will accept the 3rd one, because the 3rd one is a name the council has been considering for years anyway. He has been a patient man. He has waited 2 years to be sure you were out of reach. He chose this morning because Asuma is officially off duty and the Aburame are at a clan retreat in the eastern forest. He believed you were gone. He believed the village's teeth were elsewhere. He believed wrong. He believed wrong." Naruto turned his head a fraction toward the door. "Asuma-sensei." "Yes. Stay with the Hokage. The tower is the 2nd target. The 1st target is the bunker. If the bunker falls in time, the tower never opens." "Understood. If anything reaches this room before I return, end it. Save the politeness for the funeral." "Understood." Hiruzen inclined his head. It was the smallest possible nod, but to anyone who could read it, it was the nod of a man giving permission to appear. "Bring me his arm," he said. "You will have it on this desk before the 2nd bell." He turned and went back out the window the way he had come. The root bunker that Danzo had spent 10 years rebuilding sat under a derelict ceramics workshop in the western quarter of Konoha, 2 streets in from the old wall. The workshop above ground had a sign that read "Closed for inventory" and had read "Closed for inventory" for 9 years running. Inside the workshop, behind a kiln that had not been used in a decade, a stone hatch in the floor opened onto a stairway. The stairway dropped 6 stories into the earth. At the bottom of the stairway sat a bunker that had been designed by Danzo himself to withstand a direct strike from a Bijudama. It had been designed under the assumption that the thing coming for it would arrive from above and would announce itself first. Naruto walked into the workshop through the front door at a stroll. The 2 root operatives standing inside as caretakers, dressed as a husband and wife pair of potters, had no time to draw weapons. The operative's eyes met his eyes for a single second, and then their eyes met nothing ever again, because their skulls came apart in the middle, the way a root mask had once come apart in the middle in a corridor under the village 7 years before. Their bodies folded forward at the knees. He stepped over them and crossed the workshop and lifted the kiln out of the way with one hand. He set it down on the floor. He pressed his palm flat against the hatch. The hatch did not need to be unlocked. A pulse went out of his palm. The seal on the hatch unspooled into thin black thread, and the thread fell away in lines of ash, and the hatch swung up on its hinges. He started down the stairs. The stairs were lit by chakra lanterns at intervals. The lanterns burned blue. The pentagram under his sandals lit in faint counterpoint to the lantern light, and the lanterns themselves dimmed as he passed beneath them, the way a candle dims when an older fire enters a room. At the bottom of the stairs sat the antechamber. The antechamber was guarded by 8 root operatives. They were already in attack formation when his foot touched the last step. They had been warned by the seal break above. They had been trained, every one of them, to fight as a unit and to die as a unit, and they had been told nothing about the boy in the black coat because Danzo had refused to believe the boy would ever set foot in this building again. The boy lifted one hand. A wave of conqueror's pressure went out of his palm in a half disc that reached the 8 operatives in the same heartbeat. 5 of them dropped where they stood, eyes rolled back. The other 3, the strongest 3, stayed upright for exactly long enough to comprehend that they were standing in front of a thing the human nervous system had no procedures for. Then they dropped too. He stepped over them and went through the next door. The next door was a corridor. The corridor lined with cells. He stopped in the corridor. The cells were empty. He had known they would be empty because Hiruzen had been pulling children out of those cells in 2s and 3s for the last 2 years. Every time the village had found one of the root operatives, Naruto had let live in alleys with their mouths shut and traced the operative's old route back to a holding site. The cells had been emptied as of 9 months ago. The last child had been rehomed with a foster family in a fishing village on the southern coast. Danzo had failed to notice because Danzo had stopped using the cells years ago. The cells were empty, and Naruto walked past them with the slow tread of a man revisiting a house he had once owned. At the end of the corridor sat the inner door. He pushed it open. Danzo Shimura was in the inner chamber with 11 of his most loyal operatives and the long, scroll-wrapped weapon he had been keeping for an occasion like this one. He had been in the middle of giving the strike order for the tower. The bell had not yet rung. His mouth was open. His remaining eye was on a map of the village pinned to the wall. He looked up when the door opened. His mouth stayed open. The 11 operatives in the room moved at once. They had been chosen by Danzo himself for their speed and their loyalty, and they moved in a synchronized opening pattern that at any other moment in their lives would have been called the finest piece of small unit work this village had ever produced. Naruto did not raise his hand. He raised his eyes. The verdict went out of his gaze in a single horizontal sweep across the room. It crossed all 11 operatives at chest height. The 11 operatives ceased in the middle of their attack pattern to have torsos. Their heads and their pelvises and their legs hit the floor as separate pieces. The wall behind them, where the gaze continued for half an inch beyond the last man, developed a horizontal slot the width of a sword blade and 3 feet long. Danzo was the only person left standing in the room. He stood very straight. He had not survived 2 wars and a Sanin's purge by losing his composure at the moment of his death. "Vessel," he said. "You used that word the last time. It was correct then. It is correct now. It was wrong then. It is more wrong now." Naruto stepped into the room. His cane tapped the stone. The pentagram under his sandals lit in lines that he had outgrown the need to anchor his power in years ago, but the pentagram lit anyway out of long habit, the way a familiar dog comes to a door it has come to for years. "You built a hive in my house," he said. "I told you the first time we met that I would pull the eggs out of the walls in time. I am sorry it took me 7 years. I had a girl to walk home from the academy. I had soup to eat. I had a garden to tend. The eggs waited." Danzo's hand moved to the bandages on his right arm. He had been preparing this moment for years. He had 10 Sharingan in the limb, 10 different jutsu loaded into them, and one final reserve in the form of an Izanagi he had been saving for the only opponent in the world he had ever feared. He performed the seal sequence at the speed of a man who had performed it 10,000 times in front of a mirror. His arm came up. 10 Sharingan opened along the limb at once. The Izanagi activated. In the next half second, Danzo was no longer in the room he had been in. He was 3 feet to the left, behind a pillar, with his arm extended and a jutsu already on his fingers, the jutsu he had been saving for this specific situation, the wind style, vacuum cutter that he had once used to maim a Kage. Naruto's head turned the quarter inch. His hand closed around Danzo's wrist before the wind left Danzo's fingers. The Izanagi tried to fire again. It met something it had never been built to meet. It met a will that had outlived the Aijutsu's own origin civilization. The Sharingan in the arm cracked across their irises one after another in a sound like ice on a winter lake. The arm itself began to smoke at the bandages. "You spent your life building cages," Naruto said. "I am the lock you could never pick." He tore the arm off at the shoulder. He did it in one motion, without ceremony, the way a man takes a dead branch off a tree. The arm came away in a fall of bandages and ash. The Sharingan inside the limb wept black. Danzo's mouth came open and made a sound that was no word. He fell back against the pillar with his good hand clutching the stump. Naruto looked at the arm in his hand. He looked at Danzo. "You will not bleed to death," he said. "I would consider that a kindness, and I am in no kind mood. The Hokage asked for your arm. He will have your arm. You will be coming with it." He set the arm down on the council table. He took Danzo by the back of the neck. He walked out of the inner chamber with the old warhawk dangling from his left hand and the severed arm tucked under his right elbow, the cane tapping at his hip, and behind him, the 11 dismembered operatives slid down the walls in stages. He sealed the bunker on his way out. The seal he laid across the hatch was no Konoha seal. It was a seal in lines of black flame, drawn freehand, that closed the lower 6 stories of the building forever. The 30 root sleepers that Danzo had not yet activated, who were waiting in cells below the bunker chamber for a signal that would now never come, would be retrieved by Hiruzen's selected Anbu within the day. The bunker itself would be filled in with concrete the following week. The workshop above would be torn down and replaced with a noodle shop, which would, in time, become one of Ino's favorite places to eat lunch on hot afternoons, although she would not learn until much later why her usual seat looked out at a particular patch of unremarkable masonry. Naruto walked back across the rooftops of the village with the old warhawk under his arm. He reached the Hokage tower as the second bell rang. He set Danzo down on the floor of the Hokage's office in front of the desk. He set the severed arm beside the man. The arm twitched once, the way a fresh-cut chicken foot twitches, and then went still. Hiruzen looked down at Danzo. Danzo looked up at Hiruzen. The 2 old men, who had been classmates once under the second Hokage, who had taken their first Chunin exam together at the age of 10, who had stood beside each other at the funeral of the second and the inauguration of the third, and a great many smaller occasions besides, looked at each other across the floor of the office for a long count. "Hiruzen," Danzo said. "Old friend," Hiruzen said. "I did what was necessary. You did what you wished. You called it necessary. There is a difference." Danzo's mouth worked. He was a man who had always had a final argument prepared. He found, looking up at the Hokage with his arm gone and his network gutted and a child standing over his shoulder with a cane, that he had nothing prepared for this particular room. It was for the village. It was for you. Be silent, Shimura. You have spoken enough in this lifetime. Hiruzen's hand moved across the desk. It came back with a kunai. It was a small kunai, the kind a young Chunin carries on his first border patrol. Hiruzen had carried this one on his own first border patrol, 60 years before. He had kept it in his desk drawer all this time because there were certain debts in a life that he had wanted to leave the option open of paying personally. He stepped around the desk. Naruto stepped back. Hiruzen knelt on the floor in front of his old classmate. He set one hand on Danzo's shoulder where the bandages had been pulled aside. He said something to him in a voice that did not carry past the inch between their faces. Danzo's eye closed. He nodded once. Hiruzen put the kunai through his old friend's throat. He held it there until the body went still. Then he withdrew it and stood and set the kunai on the desk and stood for a moment with both his hands on the wood, breathing. Naruto did not speak. Asuma did not speak. After a while, Hiruzen straightened. He turned. He looked at the boy in the black coat with eyes that were, for the first time in 2 years, free of a weight nobody else in the room had ever quite been able to see. "Thank you," Hiruzen said. "It was my error to leave him alive the first time. It was your mercy. I will not call it an error. I will call it the price of mercy. The bill comes due eventually for all of us." He crossed to the desk. He opened the bottom drawer. He drew out a wrapped scroll, sealed in red wax, and set it on the desk in front of Naruto. This was taken from Shimura's safe house 6 months ago by an operative I trusted more than I trusted my own son. No offense to Asuma. The scroll contains every piece of root intelligence on an organization that wears red clouds on their cloaks. They call themselves Akatsuki. They have 10 members. Shimura was in contact with 2 of them. He was selling information about you. He had been selling information about you for a year. Naruto's hand went to the scroll. He did not open it. He set it inside his coat. How much did he tell them? Enough. The rest he held back. What he held back he sold dear. They have been watching you for a year. They are 9 men and 1 woman. Their leader operates out of a city in the Rain Country. Their pursuit of you is the personal interest of one of their members, a man in an orange mask. The rest of them follow his interest because his interest pays. I am aware of the masked man. Are you? In the manner that a horse is aware of a wolf. Yes. Hiruzen looked at him for a long second. They will come for you, Naruto. They will. Soon. Soon. What will you do? I will allow them to come. I will be at home. I will be in the field with Ino. I will let them sort out the courage to step through the gate. When they step through it, I will end them on the porch. If they cannot find the courage, I will find them. The errand will be done either way. Hiruzen looked at his pipe on the desk. He did not pick it up. You make it sound like a chore. It is a chore. The chore I have been here to perform. There were several chores. This was the largest of them. The garden is the rest. He inclined his head a quarter inch toward the Hokage. He turned. He walked out of the office on his own feet, leaving the old warhawk's body on the floor and the arm beside it, leaving Asuma to deal with the cleanup, leaving Hiruzen to sit at last in his own chair, in his own room, in a village where the last buried tooth had been pulled. He went home. The hawk on the railing was still there. The sparrow had come back. Ino was kneeling beside the rice pot with a cloth in her hand. She looked up when he came through the gate. She looked at his coat. There was no blood on the coat. There was ash on the right sleeve, fine ash, the color of old paper. It is done, he said. All of it? That piece of it. The piece that was inside the walls. The next piece is outside the walls. It will take longer. She looked at the ash on his sleeve. She rose and crossed to him and brushed the ash off with the cloth in her hand. She did not speak. He let her brush the ash off his coat, the way he had let a 9-year-old girl wipe blood off his face 7 years before in this same yard, with the same wet rag, with the same chicken in the background, scolding the air. He set his hand against the back of her head for the count of 1 breath. She set her cheek against his shoulder for the count of 1 breath. Then they went inside, and the rice was warm. Jiraiya of the Sanin came back into the village 4 days later, on foot, alone, dusty up to the calves and carrying a bag over one shoulder that contained, by his own count, 11 scrolls of field notes and a single bottle of plum wine he had been saving for a particular conversation. He came in through the western gate at sundown. He did not stop at the gatehouse. He did not stop at his own apartment, which had stood empty for 2 years and which would need an hour with a broom before he could lie down in it. He went directly to the Hokage Tower, climbed the stairs with the slow tread of a man whose knees were no longer 20, and pushed open the door of his old sensei's office without knocking. Hiruzen looked up. Sit down. I'd rather stand. I'd rather you sit down. I have been waiting for 2 years to talk to you sitting down. Jiraiya sat. He set the bag of scrolls on the floor beside the chair. He set the bottle of plum wine on the desk between them. He did not open it. He looked at his sensei across the desk and saw for the first time in his life an old man. You look better than you did 2 years ago, sensei. Someone took a weight off the village. I read the reports. You read sanitized reports. I have been a spy for 40 years. I read between the lines. Then you know what I am going to ask you. You are going to ask me to brief you on the Akatsuki in detail, and you are going to ask me to spend a week with the boy who has been wearing the village like a coat for the last 7 years, because you want to know whether the village deserves him or he deserves the village. The answer to the second question is the latter, by the way. I have already done the work for you on that one. Hiruzen lit his pipe. He breathed in. He breathed out. Brief me on Akatsuki. Jiraiya did. It took an hour. He spoke through 9 of the 11 scrolls without consulting them because he had spent 2 years writing them and knew their contents by the chapter. The organization had 10 members. They were Jinchuriki hunters, formally, but their funding flowed through a number of state and merchant channels that suggested a longer game than simple tailed beast harvesting. The hidden architect was a man calling himself Pain, operating out of Omegakure, who had taken the city by force years ago and now ran it as a kind of war temple. The masked man was not Madara Uchiha, despite the rumors. The masked man was something else. Jiraiya did not know what yet. The masked man wore the name Madara the way a man wears a borrowed coat. Hiruzen took notes. He took notes in his own hand on parchment because the Akatsuki intelligence was the kind of intelligence he had no intention of trusting to a secretary's pen. When Jiraiya was done, he looked up. And the boy, Hiruzen said, tomorrow. I want to talk to him fresh. I have read the reports. I want to see him. You will see him at the training field on the south slope at the 3rd hour. I will tell Asuma to bring him. Tell Asuma to leave him. He will not come alone if he thinks he is being summoned. Naru, he will bring the girl. The girl can come too. I would like to see her at this point. The reports do not do her justice by the look of them. Hiruzen smiled. It was a small smile. He had not been smiling much. You will see her tomorrow, Jiraiya. Get some sleep. Find your apartment. Eat something. The conversation I have been waiting for is the one we're about to have, but the briefing comes first, and the briefing is finished. Sensei. Yes, he is what they say he is. He is more. More. Sit with him for an hour tomorrow. You will understand. Jiraiya stood. He shouldered the bag. He left the bottle of plum wine on the desk. He went to find his apartment and a bath, and Hiruzen sat at his desk for another hour, drawing a small circle on the parchment where he had written the word Akatsuki, the same kind of circle he had once drawn under his pen when he had written the words the crown. The training field on the south slope at the 3rd hour the next morning was an open patch of grass that the village used for civilian wrestling on festival days. It had a stone bench. It had a single old plum tree at the corner. It had a view of the rooftops below and the river beyond, and the morning sun came over the trees at an angle that lit the grass in long strips of gold. Jiraiya was already there when Naruto arrived. The Sanin was sitting on the stone bench. He had a kettle of tea on a small brazier at his feet. He had 2 cups. He had taken off his sandals and his feet were in the grass. He looked in that posture like a man who had spent a lot of his life sitting in fields waiting for people. Naruto came up the slope at a slow walk. His cane tapped the path. Ino walked beside him. She wore her own field clothes, a kunoichi vest over a long-sleeved shirt, her hair tied back, a kunai pouch on her thigh. She had not been told they were coming to meet a Sanin. She had been told they were going to the south field to see an old friend of Asuma's. She figured out who the old friend was when she saw the white hair, and her step did not change. She arrived at the bench 2 paces behind Naruto. Naruto inclined his head a 1/4 inch. Jiraiya-sama. Just Jiraiya, kid. As you like. Sit, both of you. The tea's hot. I brought the cups. They sat. Naruto folded onto the grass with the cane across his knees. Ino sat beside him with her ankles crossed under her. Jiraiya poured. He passed a cup. He passed another cup. He kept the 3rd for himself. He looked at Naruto over the rim of his cup. You're not what I was expecting. You expected larger. I expected louder. You don't seem to do loud. Loud is a young man's tool. I am older than I look. How old would you say? In the years that count, several centuries. In the years of this body, 15. That tracks. The reports said you were old in the bones. I wanted to hear you say it. Ino sipped her tea. She did not interrupt. She had spent 7 years sitting next to this kind of conversation, and she had learned a long time ago that the way she contributed was by being present, by being seen, by being the thing on the other side of the table that reminded Naruto why the conversation mattered. Jiraiya looked at her. He looked back at Naruto. He set his cup down. I came to spar with you. I assumed. You assumed right. I came to find out, with my own hands, what the reports left out. The reports left out a lot. I want to know what I'm dealing with before I write the next round of intelligence on you. You will not be writing intelligence on me, Jiraiya. You will be writing intelligence with me. There is a difference. There is. I noticed it. Stand up, kid. The plum tree at the corner is the boundary. The river behind us is the boundary. The slope down to the village is the boundary. Anything that leaves those boundaries counts as a foul. Naruto rose. He set the teacup on the bench. He handed his cane to Ino. She took it without speaking and rested it across her own knees and watched him walk out to the center of the field. Jiraiya stood up. He stretched his shoulders. He bit his thumb. The summoning seal lit under his sandals. A toad the size of a small house appeared in the field. Then a smaller toad on its shoulder. Then a third toad on the first toad's head. An ancient white one with a long staff. Sage mode was already gathering at the corners of Jiraiya's eyes. He had decided on the walk up the slope to go in with everything he had at once. He was the strongest spiritual fighter on the continent, and he intended to find out in the first 30 seconds whether the rumors about this boy were the truth or a courteous overstatement by an old sensei. Naruto looked up at the largest toad. Good morning. The toad looked down at him. Naruto, the toad said. Its voice was the voice of a creature that had spoken with 3 generations of Sannin. Jiraiya did not tell us who we were fighting today. He told me he wanted to spar with the boy on the Sarutobi team. He did not tell us it was you. He has been away. He has not yet understood what the village has been keeping. The toad turned its head a fraction toward Jiraiya, who was standing on top of its skull in sage mode now, his orange-red eyes lit. Boss, the toad said. What? You may want to reconsider. Absolutely not. Boss, drop me Gamabunta. The toad sighed. The toad dropped Jiraiya into the field with a flick of its head. The toad and its companions vanished in a puff of summoning smoke and went home, because the largest toad on the continent had taken one look at the boy in front of him and made an executive decision that he had better things to do that morning than be present for what was about to happen. Jiraiya landed in a crouch. He came up with a Rasengan in each hand and a sage technique on his lips. He flickered across the field in the next heartbeat. Naruto did not move. The sage mode Rasengan came in at his sternum. The Rasengan was the signature jutsu of the 4th Hokage, refined to its highest expression, a sphere of shape-manipulated chakra concentrated to a point so dense that it could grind a man into a paste against a tree. Jiraiya's version, in full Sag, carried the additional weight of Senjutsu chakra, which could touch and harm even creatures that resisted ordinary chakra by design. It hit Naruto's chest. It came apart. The Senjutsu chakra unraveled against an armament coating Naruto had laid across his torso without changing the expression on his face. The Rasengan spin lost its shape. The sphere of chakra burst sideways and went into the grass at his feet and tore a furrow 10 feet long across the field. And then it was done, and Jiraiya was standing 2 feet from him with his arm extended and his face very still. Jiraiya said. You should attempt the second hand. Jiraiya attempted the second hand. The second Rasengan met the same coating and came apart the same way. The furrow on the other side of Naruto's feet matched the first one. The 2 furrows formed a kind of decorative pattern in the grass, like a fan opened on either side of the boy's sandals. Jiraiya stepped back. He had not yet broken a sweat. He had, however, broken something else inside him, a small private confidence that he had been carrying since he had been 20 years old and a Sannin for the first time. The confidence that there were perhaps 3 people in the world who could survive his Sage Mode Rasengan at a direct hit. He revised the number to 4. He kept his face still. He came back in with hand seals, fire style, earth style, water style, 3 jutsu and 3 breaths, each one of A rank or above. The fire came in as a column of flame the width of a horse. The earth came up under Naruto's feet as a spike the size of a man. The water came in as a wave from the river behind the field, which Jiraiya had reached with a summoning thread the moment the spar had started, and which crashed down on the field in a rolling wall 12 feet high. The fire reached Naruto and turned to thin black smoke before it touched him. The spike came up under him and broke against a single spider leg that unfolded from his back and braced itself against the earth. The wave came down on top of the entire scene and split around his shoulders in 2 clean ropes of water that ran off into the grass behind him and away into the slope. When the steam cleared, he was standing in the same place he had been standing. His coat was wet. Jiraiya whistled low. "Okay," he said. "Okay, that's the warm-up." He went into full sage stance. He drew his arms back. He gathered Senjutsu chakra in his palms in a configuration that he had not used in 15 years and had only used twice in his life because the configuration required a specific kind of opponent, and he had never had the chance. He launched a frog song. The frog song was a genjutsu carried on a sound wave shaped by the white sage toad on his shoulder, except the sage toad was not on his shoulder today, so he carried the sound himself. And the sound came out of his mouth in a frequency that was meant to lock the inner ear of an opponent and put him into a stasis from which he could not move. The technique had paralyzed an entire bandit village in one of Jiraiya's earlier campaigns. It had paralyzed a single-tailed beast on the field once, for the count of 40 seconds, which had been long enough to save the lives of 2 of his comrades. It reached Naruto. It washed over him. He listened to it for a beat. He yawned. "Your frequency is sharp," he said. "I will give you that. I have heard better singers in the salt courts of a city you have never visited." Jiraiya laughed. It was a real laugh. It came up out of his chest in a sound he had not made in 2 years. He bent forward at the waist for a moment, hands on his knees, laughing because there was nothing else to do, because the boy was making jokes in the middle of a sage mode frog song and the jokes were landing. He straightened. He wiped his eye. "All right," he said. "Last one. Don't take it personally." He summoned the toad mouth. It was the trapping technique, the inside the stomach jutsu, the one that had ended more A-rank opponents in his career than any other tool he carried. He summoned the largest version of it he had ever used, large enough to swallow a building, and the toad mouth opened underneath Naruto in the field with the speed of a guillotine. The mouth closed. Naruto was inside. Jiraiya stood in the field with his breath held. He had used this technique on Jonin, who had broken out of it. He had used it on a Kaj candidate once, who had carved his way out of it with a lightning cutter. He had never used it on anyone who had simply walked back out. The toad mouth opened. Naruto walked out. He had a small fold of the toad's inner lining draped across his shoulder as a souvenir. He was using it as a kind of cape. He had picked it off the toad's tongue on his way out. He returned the toad to its summoning realm with a small inclined nod of thanks to the air where the toad had been, and he laid the fold of toad lining across the stone bench beside Ino, who took it without flinching and folded it into a triangle. He returned to the center of the field. "My turn? Your turn." Jiraiya planted his feet. Naruto held out one hand. He did not change form. He did not summon the Ushi Oni. He did not extend a single spider leg. He simply held one hand out, palm down, and a focused beam of Conqueror's pressure went out of his palm and across the field and hit Jiraiya in the center of his chest. It did not knock Jiraiya off his feet. It pinned him in place. It was a different application of the pressure than the waveform he used in combat. It was Conqueror's haki used as a hold rather than a strike. The Sage Mode chakra in Jiraiya's body recognized it and tried to push back. The Sage Mode chakra failed. Jiraiya, fixed in place, looked across at the boy and felt, for the second time in his life, the specific sensation of standing in front of something he could not defeat. The first time had been when he had been 11 years old in a sparring match with his Hokage, and his Hokage had been the second Hokage, and the second Hokage had been the greatest mind in the village. The second time was now. "Drop the mode," Naruto said. "We are done." Jiraiya dropped the Sage Mode. The pressure released. He walked over to the stone bench. He sat down on it heavily. He picked up his cup of tea. He drank what was left in it. He set the cup down and looked at Naruto for a long count. He fished a cigarette out of his pouch. He lit it. He did not, this time, look like a man enjoying a cigarette. He looked like a man marking the end of something. "The strongest shinobi I have ever stood across from," he said. "And the funny thing about it is that you are not a shinobi at all." "Correct. What are you then?" "A guest. The body is local. The guest is from elsewhere." "From where?" "A sea you have not heard of. A century you would not recognize. The names of the islands are gone. The empires that fought across them are gone. I was the last of a particular kind of officer in a particular kind of court, and the court has been ash for centuries. I was given another life. I chose to spend it on a flower field and a girl in an apron." Jiraiya looked at Ino. Ino was looking at her tea. She had heard the speech before in pieces over the years. She had heard the words flower field and apron in particular many times. She had not, however, heard them said to a stranger, and there was a particular shade of pink on her cheekbones that suggested she liked the way they sounded to a stranger. Jiraiya looked back at Naruto. "The Akatsuki," he said. "Yes, you will handle them. With your help, with Asuma's help, with the Hokage's help, with the help of the woman beside me, who will handle the rest of them with me." "The woman beside you?" "Yes. She's 15. She is the woman beside me." Jiraiya looked at Ino again. Ino looked up from her tea this time and met his eye and held it, the way she had been holding the eyes of clan heads twice her age for the last year, because she had been the youngest member at her father's council meetings for 2 years now, and had learned exactly how to hold a man's eye in a room. "All right," Jiraiya said. He laughed again, smaller this time. "All right, the woman beside you, noted." He took a long pull on the cigarette. He let it out in a slow breath. "Brief me on what you want from me, Crown. Stay in the village for a month. Train Ino in the seal work. She will need to keep me anchored in the largest version of myself for the longest period. She will be the second line in the largest fight we are about to walk into, and her line will hold if I prepare it now. Beyond that, I require nothing of you but the company you would have given me anyway." "Done. The Hokage will have my paperwork by sundown." "Thank you, Jiraiya. Just Jiraiya. Just Jiraiya." Jiraiya finished the cigarette. He stubbed it out on the stone bench. He stood, stretched, picked up his bag of scrolls, and started down the slope toward the village. Halfway down, he paused. He turned back. "Kid." "Yes." "My old student." "Yes, he would have liked you." "He would have. He left me a great many tools to work with. I owe him a long bow when I am finished here. He'd be proud. He would be relieved." Jiraiya nodded. He turned. He went down the slope toward the village. Like Naruto looked at Ino. He sat down beside her on the stone bench. He picked up his cane from her lap. She handed him the fold of toad lining, which she had folded into a neat triangle. "Souvenir," she said. "For what?" "For your collection." "I have no collection." "You do now." He looked at her. She looked at him. A smile started at the corner of his mouth and at the corner of hers at the same time, and it spread the same way on both of their faces at the same pace. And after a moment, they were both laughing into their teacups, and the morning sun on the field turned the grass gold for the count of 10 breaths, and the plum tree at the corner moved in the small wind off the river. He took her hand on the bench. She let him take it. 3 weeks, he said. Then we begin. I know. You will train with Jiraiya for the first 2 of them. He will teach you a seal you will not enjoy learning. I'll learn it. I know you will. I am informing you rather than asking you. I know. I'm telling you back. He looked at her. He bent his head and pressed his lips for the count of 1 breath to the back of her hand, the way he had pressed his lips to the crown of her head on the porch 4 days before. She did not blush this time. She watched him do it with her chin tilted, her eyes uncovering him the way they had uncovered him at the gate when she was 9, and she squeezed his hand once, hard, before he released it. They sat on the bench until the kettle was cold. Then they went home. Word came up the coast 2 weeks later in the form of a young woman in a traveler's cloak who arrived at the gates of Konoha on foot with a small bag and a polite request to speak to the young man with the cane. The gate guard sent a runner to the Yamanaka compound. The runner found Naruto in the south plot of the flower field, where he was helping Ino restake a row of bellflowers that had blown down in the previous night's storm. He listened to the runner's message. He set down the mallet he had been using on the stakes. He looked at Ino. "Bring her to the porch," he said to the runner. "Give her tea. Tell her I will be there in the time it takes me to wash my hands." The runner left. Ino tied off the last of the bellflower stakes herself. She did not ask who the young woman was. She had a guess. She had heard Naruto mention, exactly once in 7 years, a girl named Haku who had survived the Yuki purges, and she had filed the name away in the place where she filed all of his small references to people he had once helped and chose never to mention again unless asked. They walked back to the house together. Haku Yuki was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea in both hands. She had grown into a slender young woman of 17, with the same dark hair pulled back behind her ears, the same violet eyes, the same posture of a person who had spent a long time learning to be invisible and had since chosen in a small way each day to be visible again. She wore a traveler's cloak over a plain blue tunic and trousers. She had a kunai pouch on her belt. She had a soft, watchful face that did not match the dust on her sandals. She rose when Naruto came up the porch step. She bowed. It was a low bow. It was the bow of a country girl meeting a regional lord, except the country girl had been a Yuki princess in another life, and the regional lord had once carried her out of a sea cave and given her to a hamlet to keep. "Naruto-sama," she said. "Haku. I came as soon as I heard there is a man on the coast. Sit, drink, tell me from the beginning." She sat, she drank. Ino sat beside her on the porch with her own cup of tea, and Inoichi appeared at the kitchen door at some point and stood there with his arms folded and listened without entering the conversation. The man on the coast, by Haku's account, was tall and the color of a deep water shark. He had a long, bandage-wrapped sword on his back that hummed when he walked, and a row of jagged teeth that he showed when he smiled. He had arrived at the hamlet 3 nights before and had asked, in a perfectly courteous voice, whether anyone in the village remembered a boy with a cane who had passed through 5 years ago escorting refugees from the mist. The villagers had said no. They had been told to say no. The man had smiled and said he would be staying at the inn for a week. He had paid in advance. He had hurt no one yet. He had not needed to. The hamlet had not slept since. Haku had walked out of the hamlet on the 2nd night, alone, with a single bag, and had run the distance to Konoha in 3 days. He said your name, Naruto-sama. Not the public name. The other one. The crown, yes. And he is from the organization in the red clouds. His cloak is folded inside his pack. I saw it through the seam when he hung it on his door. The cloud pattern matches the description in the warning the hamlet headman received from the Hokage last year. Naruto sat on the porch step. He looked out across the flower field. The afternoon sun was on the irises. The bees were working the new bellflowers Ino had restaked. He was silent for a count of 10. "Inoichi-san," he said over his shoulder. "Yes. Asuma is at the Chunin training grounds today. Send a runner. Tell him to find me at the western gate at the 2nd bell tomorrow. Tell him to bring his trench knives, but not to expect a fight. Tell him to bring an extra coat. The coast wind is cold this season. Yes. Tell the Hokage I am taking a personal trip. Tell him it concerns the trafficking work I left half finished 5 years ago. Tell him I will return inside 7 days. Yes." Inoichi went into the house. The screen door slid shut. Naruto looked at Haku. "You did the right thing coming here. You once told me there would be a thing I could ask of you. I am asking. You are reporting rather than asking. There is a difference. You will go back with us. You will not be in the fight. You will sit in the inn with the headman's wife and you will pour tea for her until I come for you. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good." Ino set her cup down. She stood. She looked at Naruto. "I'm coming too." "You are. You weren't going to leave me here." "I had not finished the thought yet. You are coming. Shino will stay. The garden needs a guard, and your father will be more at ease if I leave a teammate behind to mind the gate. Asuma, you and me. We move at the 1st bell." Ino nodded. She picked up the empty teacups and went into the kitchen to wash them. Haku watched her go. "She is the one," Haku said. "Yes, she is exactly as you described in the letters. She is more." Haku smiled. It was a small smile, the kind a younger sister gives an older brother when the older brother is acting like an older brother. I am glad to meet her at last, Naruto-sama. You will spend the trip with her. She will like you. Be patient with her questions. She has been wanting to know your story for years. I will tell it to her on the road. Thank you. They left at the first bell the next morning. The coast, Hamlet, was a 4-day run for a normal team, and a 2-day run for Asuma and Ino, and a 2-day walk for Naruto, who could have made it in 9 hours, but who chose to keep pace with the others because the company was the point of the trip. They moved through the spring forests in a loose triangle. Asuma on point, Ino and Haku in the middle with their heads together over a small map and a great many questions and answers, traded back and forth in low voices, Naruto at the rear with his cane. The pace was comfortable. The forest was at its best, the leaves new and the wind light, and on the second night they slept in a clearing under a stand of pines with a small fire burning between them. Ino sat down beside Naruto by the fire after the others had bedded down. Haku is wonderful. I know. She said you carried her down a coast road when she was 7 and told her she was a flower that had blown into the wrong field. I do not remember saying that. She remembers. Then I said it. You said a lot of things in those years that you don't remember. I remember the important ones. The bellflowers in the south plot. The frog you said had eyebrows. The first time you came out of the kitchen with a damp cloth. She looked at him across the fire. You remember the cloth. I remember the cloth. She looked at him for a long count. The fire cracked between them. Somewhere out in the trees, an owl called once and went silent. I love you, she said. It was the first time she had said the words out loud. She had said them in 100 ways in 7 years. In dishes she had set in front of him. In stitches she had put in the elbow of his coat. In the hand she had pressed to the front of his coat when he came back from the land of rice. In the chin she had tilted at him on the porch in front of Jiraiya. She had never said them in the form of the words. He looked at her across the fire. I know, he said. I have known since I was 8. I waited for you to say it because it was your line, not mine. And what's your line? I will say my line on the porch of our house after the work is finished. I have been writing it in my head for 7 years. I want to deliver it on the porch in the morning sun, rather than over a fire in a forest with Asuma snoring 20 feet behind us. Asuma is not snoring. Asuma is faking sleep. He has been listening to us for the last 5 minutes. Asuma-sensei, go to sleep. There was a long pause, then, from across the fire, the unmistakable cough of a man who had been caught faking sleep and the sound of Asuma rolling onto his other side and pulling his coat up over his head. Ino laughed. She laughed for a long time, with her hand pressed over her mouth to keep from waking Haku, and Naruto watched her laugh with his chin in his hand and the firelight moving on his face, and he reached across the embers and tucked a strand of her hair back behind her ear with one knuckle. On the porch, she said. On the porch. She went to sleep with her bedroll a foot from his. They arrived at the hamlet on the 3rd morning. The hamlet was a half circle of low wooden buildings tucked into a cove between 2 rocky headlands. The fishing boats were drawn up on the sand at the high tide line. The headman's house sat at the end of the row, its front door painted a faded green. The inn sat across the dirt road from the headman's house, 2 stories, with a stable beside it. The man in the upstairs window of the inn was already watching the road when they came around the bend. Kisame Hoshigaki had been watching the road for 3 mornings. He had been told by his organization to draw the boy in the black coat into the open and to make a single attempt at capture. He had been told that if capture failed, he was to make a single attempt at assessment and to retreat alive if the assessment confirmed what the masked man already suspected. He had been told to be cautious. He had been told a great many things. He had decided on the 2nd morning that he was going to ignore the cautious part. He was Kisame Hoshigaki. He had been hostile to caution for 28 years of being a shinobi. Samahada at his back had been singing for a fight for 2 weeks straight, and Samahada had its own opinions about whether a fight was worth taking, and Samahada had been awake for 3 nights running. He came down the inn stairs. He came out the front door. He stood in the middle of the dirt road with his sword across his back and his cloak open and his teeth showing in a grin that the hamlet would talk about for the rest of its history. "Crown of Konoha," he called. The voice carried across the cove. "I came a long way for this. Send the children inside." Naruto looked at Haku. "The inn, the headman's wife, T. Stay there until I come for you." Haku bowed. She went. He looked at Ino. "The headman's house, the cellar. Asuma-sensei stays at the door." Asuma nodded. Ino did not move. "I am staying out here." Ino, "You wanted me trained for the long fight. This is a short one. I'll stand at the edge of the cove and I'll throw if I get the chance. I'm not going down a cellar while a man with a sword the size of a horse calls your name in the street." He looked at her. He looked at the man in the road. He looked back at her. He considered, for a count of one breath, the cost of arguing. At the edge of the cove, behind Asuma, "If I tell you to move, you move. I move." Good. He stepped past her. He walked out into the road. Kisame was 12 feet tall by appearance, with skin the color of a deep-sea fish and a row of teeth he kept showing. Samahada at his back was unwrapped to the third row of spikes, which meant the sword was awake and hungry. He had positioned himself at the center of the road so that the sun came in low behind him, and his shadow fell long across the dirt toward the boy in the black coat coming up the road toward him. "You're smaller than I thought you'd be," Kisame said. "You are exactly as large as I expected. You knew I was coming. I knew someone was coming. I had not bothered to learn the name. Kisame Hoshigaki. A pleasure, Hoshigaki-san." "My friend in the mask said you might be polite. He said you might also be the worst thing I have ever stood across from. He said both of those at the same lunch." "Your friend is well informed. He's a pain in my ass mostly. Are we doing this?" "We are." Samahada came off Kisame's back in a single motion. The bandages tore. The full row of spikes opened along the blade. The sword shrieked, a sound like a metal pot dragged across a stone floor, and it shrieked again as Kisame brought it up over his shoulder. He flickered. He covered the 12 paces of dirt road between them in the time it took Naruto to lower his cane to the ground and brace it. Samahada came down at Naruto's neck in an overhead arc with the full force of an A-rank swordsman behind it. Naruto caught the sword. He caught it with his bare hand, with haki along the palm and along the fingers, and the spikes on Samahada bent inward where they met his skin. The sword shrieked again. The shriek had a different pitch this time. It was a shriek of recognition. Samahada had been alive long enough to know that some kinds of skin did not feed it, and this kind of skin was a kind it had never encountered before. "Huh," Kisame said. "Sword has opinions. Always has. Tell it I appreciate the introduction. It can hear you." "Good." Naruto closed his fingers around the spikes. He pulled. Samahada came out of Kasame's hands. Kisame stepped back. Naruto turned the sword in his fingers, examined it, and tossed it underhand back to Kisame. Hilt first. Kisame caught it. He laughed. It was a real laugh, low and amazed. All right. I came for a fight." "You came for a fight. Let's have a fight." He went into water clone formation. 20 clones rose out of the cove behind him, made of seawater, walking up the sand toward the road. He went into shark summon stance. The water in the cove began to churn. He went into the chakra armor mode he used only against Jonin opponents, the kind that turned his skin into a low-grade plate and tripled his physical strength. Asuma, behind Ino at the edge of the cove, said, "Ino, I see. If he flanks us with the clones, I'll handle the clones. You will?" "I've been waiting for a fight like this for a year, Sensei. Watch me." She unsnapped her kunai pouch. She bit her thumb. She had not been taught a summoning, but she had been taught by her father a long-range projection of her mind transfer that allowed her to step into a clone's body for the count of 3 seconds and turn it against its caster. She had practiced it on her father's clones for the last 6 months. She had never used it on a hostile clone. The water clones came up the sand at her in a fan. She breathed in. She picked the lead one. She projected. Her mind crossed 20 feet of air and landed in the clone's body. The clone, which had been swinging a watery sword at her face, stopped in mid-swing. It turned. It looked at the clone next to it. It swung its watery sword at the clone next to it. The clone next to it came apart in a splash of seawater. The clones on either side hesitated for the count of a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, Ino's mind hopped to the next clone, and the next one came apart, and the next one, and within 10 seconds, she had cleared half the fan from the inside, while her own body stood on the sand with her hand half raised and her eyes closed. Asuma stepped in front of her body. He took the other half of the fan with his trench knives. He took them apart in a blur of chakra-edged steel and curses. In the road, Naruto moved. He moved at full speed for the first time in a long time. He had not had an opponent at this level since the beach, and the beach had been 5 years ago, and he had grown into the body in the intervening years in a way that mattered. He met Kasame in the middle of the road, and the two of them went into a clinch that lasted under a second and produced a sound like two iron bells colliding. Kasame staggered back 6 feet. Naruto did not move. Samehada came in again. Naruto caught the blade, twisted, and put one knee into Kasame's stomach. Kasame folded around the knee. Samehada came out of his hands again, and this time Naruto did not throw it back. He set the sword on the road and put one foot on it, pinning it. Samehada shrieked under his sandal in a tone that was not anger this time. It was something closer to a request to be picked up and used. "Be still," Naruto said. The word came out at the sword. The sword went still. Kasame straightened. He spat blood. He grinned with red teeth. "Oh, this is good," he said. "This is the best one I've had since Itachi. This is better than Itachi. Itachi pulls his punches. You don't, do you?" "I do not. Stop talking. Come." Kasame came. He came with everything. He came with all 8 Suiton Jutsu he knew at once. He came with shark summons that boiled up out of the cove and broke against Naruto's spider legs that had come out of his back at last. He came with chakra armor punches that hit Naruto's coat and rang against the haki underneath it like hammers on an anvil. He came for a count of 30 seconds, and at the end of 30 seconds, he was on one knee in the road, bleeding from his mouth and his left ear, and a long cut across his ribs that Naruto had opened with a single fingertip drawn along a haki edge. He looked up at the boy. "Touch the flower again," Naruto said, "and I will burn the entire garden of your plan to ash, root, and seed." Kasame's grin did not fade. "Tell that to the boss. He likes flower talk." "You will tell him yourself." Naruto bent down. He picked Samehada up off the road. The sword purred under his hand. He set it across Kasame's back. He sealed it there with a single thumb of black flame at the bindings, a temporary seal that would hold Samehada inert for one full day. He took Kasame by the back of the neck and lifted him to his feet. "You will walk out of this hamlet. You will walk to the border. You will not look back. You will tell your friends what you saw on this road. You will tell the one in the mask, in particular, that the flower in my garden is the boundary of his life. He may approach the boundary. He may not cross it. If he crosses it, I will find him in the city he sleeps in, and I will pull him out of it by the back of his neck the way I am pulling you out of this hamlet now." Kasame's grin grew an inch wider. "You're going to make him angry. Good, and when he comes, he will come. Then I will end the conversation. Walk." He let go of Kasame's neck. Kasame walked. He went down the road, past the headman's house, past the inn, past the edge of the cove, and up the bend into the trees. He did not look back. Samehada at his back hummed once, in a tone that sounded almost wistful, and then went silent. Naruto turned. Ino had opened her eyes. The clones in the cove were down. Asuma was leaning on his trench knives with a grin he did not bother to hide. Haku was on the porch of the inn with the headman's wife behind her, both of them with their hands over their mouths. Naruto walked across the cove. He walked over to Ino. He looked at her for a long beat. "Half a fan in 10 seconds. "I told you." "You did. You owe me." "What?" "The lily pond at the temple of Otomura on the way home. We pass it. I want to walk through it." "You owe me that." "Done." He held out his arm. She took it. They walked back to the inn together. The headman's wife brought tea. Haku poured. Asuma sat on the porch railing with his coat open and his cigarette lit and his shoulders shaking with laughter at intervals through the next hour because he had just watched his 15-year-old Kunoichi take half a fan of water clones from the inside with a clan technique she had developed mostly on her own, and he could not get over it. They stayed at the hamlet 2 nights. They walked back the long way through the temple of Otomura, where Ino walked the lily pond at sunset with her sandals in her hand and her hair down. Naruto walked beside her with his cane. The temple bells rang for the evening. Haku followed at a polite distance, watching the two of them with the half smile of a person who had been carried out of the worst night of her life by the boy in front of her and had now, 8 years later, been allowed to see what he had been carrying her toward. They came home. The flower field stood. The Yamanaka porch was as they had left it. Shino was at the gate when they came up the path. Mission, he said. Routine? Routine. There is also a guest at the south gate. He came on foot. He says he wishes to speak with you. He says he will wait until you are ready. Describe him. Black coat, red clouds, a face like a knife, the eyes of a man who has not slept well in some years. Naruto stopped walking. He looked at the gate. Tell him to wait in the south training field. Tell him I will be there at sundown. Understood. Shino turned and went. Naruto looked at Ino. I will be at the field. I will return in the evening. He has come alone. He has come to speak before he fights. I will give him the speech and then the fight. Be at home tonight. Do not come to the field. Naruto. I am asking Ino, not telling. Ali that he is the one I have wanted to meet in person for 2 years. I would like to give him the meeting on my own terms. All right. Thank you. He inclined his head. He kissed the back of her hand. He turned and walked toward the south training field. Itachi Uchiha was sitting on a low boulder at the edge of the south training field, with his hands folded in his lap and the hood of his cloak down. He had taken off his straw hat and set it on the grass beside him. The sun was on the western ridge. The shadows of the trees were long across the field. He had a small flask of water at his hip, and he had been drinking from it at intervals, slow swallows, the way a man rations water when he is not sure when his next meal will come. He looked up when Naruto came out of the trees. The two of them looked at each other across the field for a long count. Crown, Itachi said. Uchiha. You will be wondering why I have come alone. You came to find out whether the rumor is true. The rumor that I have lived a life before this one. Your masked friend told you what he believed, and you wanted to confirm it with your own eyes before he sent the rest of your organization in. You wanted to know what your friends are walking into. Yes, you have come without intent to capture me. That has not been my intent for some time. What is your intent? To speak, to fight if speaking does not finish the question, to learn what kind of being I am about to die for. Naruto walked across the field. He stopped 20 paces from the boulder. He set his cane in the grass at his side. He looked at the man on the boulder, and he saw, the way he had seen Danzo in the corridor at 8, the long shape of a life that had been spent in a particular kind of service. You wear guilt like an old coat, Uchiha. I have buried entire eras and worn nothing at all. Itachi did not flinch. You have read me. You are not difficult to read. You volunteered for a task you did not want. You completed it with your own hands. You have been paying for it in installments ever since. You will continue to pay until something larger than you collects on the balance. I am that thing. I will collect today if you wish, or I will let you walk away to your brother if you prefer the longer route. Itachi smiled. It was a small, tired smile. You know about my brother. I know about a great many things that the village has been holding for me. The Hokage and I read your father's last letters together 2 years ago. I know what was asked of you. I know what was promised. I know what was withheld. I know who held it. I have already taken that man's arm off. I would have left it on if I had known about you a year sooner. It would have been a fair trade. You took Shimura's arm. I took his life. The arm was a bonus for the desk. Itachi looked at his own hands. My brother will live a long life. I will see to it. He is in a hospital ward in a coastal town under a false name, recovering from the breakdown your departure caused in his mind. The Hokage's medics found him last year and removed the worst of the damage. He will not be the man you fear he is becoming. He will be a man who hates you in the abstract and loves you in his sleep, and who will in time write you a letter you will not live to read. I am sorry to tell you that part. You were going to ask. I was. You are dying. Yes. Of the illness. Yes. How long? Months. A year if I'm cautious with the technique. You came here to die today. I came here to test you. If the test went well, I intended to ask you, on my brother's behalf, to be the one who closes the account. I would rather it be you than a stranger. I would rather it be a fight than a sickness. I have been a shinobi for a long time. I would prefer to end the way a shinobi ends. Naruto looked at him for a long count. Stand up, he said. Itachi stood. He picked up his straw hat. He set it on the boulder behind him. He drew his sword. He turned his eyes red, then black, the three tomoe spinning, then the manjikyo, then the long, formal, fully expressed manjikyo of a man who had been wearing the technique into his own body for over a decade. You will use everything you have. I will. You will not pull a single technique. I will not. Begin. Itachi began. The genjutsu came first. It came as a tsukuyomi, the highest form of his manjekyo, an illusion that he had used on 3 S-rank opponents in his career and had broken 2 of them inside it. He cast it across the field in the time between blinks, and the world around Naruto bent into the red moon and the upside-down sky and the black post and the 1,000-day rack. Naruto stood in the rack for 1 second. He looked up at the moon. He said one word in the illusion, a word in a language Itachi did not recognize, and the moon cracked across the middle and fell out of the sky in pieces, and the post Naruto was tied to came apart in his hands, and the rack folded inward, and Itachi's illusion turned in on itself and broke from the inside. Naruto opened his eyes in the field. Itachi staggered. He had not had a genjutsu break from the inside in 12 years. He recovered. He drew his sword. He went into chakra blade mode, the lightning-coated kusanagi technique he had learned from Orochimaru in the year he had spent in the Akatsuki's training, and he flickered across the field at speed. Naruto caught the blade with 2 fingers. The lightning earthed through his coat into the grass. The grass at his feet smoked. The blade in his fingers bent. Itachi stepped back. He went into Amaterasu. He focused his right eye on Naruto's coat. The black fire of the highest fire technique in the world lit on Naruto's shoulder in a thin column. It burned for 1 second. Naruto looked at the fire on his shoulder. He raised one hand. He set his palm over the flame. The flame went out. The shoulder of his coat had a small black mark on it. Inoichi's wife is going to be cross with you, Uchiha. My apologies. It is the 2nd coat. The 3rd will be on me before winter. Itachi did not laugh. He did, however, smile in a way that suggested he might have laughed if he had not been concentrating. He went into Susanoo. The full ribcage rose around him first, then the arms, then the 2nd layer of armor, the bone and blade layer that had only been seen on a battlefield twice in his career. Then the 3rd, the full crystalline form, with the Yata mirror at one hand and the Totsuka blade at the other, a manifestation of the highest level of Uchiha's spiritual technique. Susanoo stood 30 feet tall over the field. The field shook under its feet. Naruto looked up at it. This is the form you have been saving. Yes, it is impressive. Thank you. I will return the courtesy. He shifted. The full Ushi Oni came up out of him the way it had come up in the arena 2 years before, except larger this time, in the way that a man's hands grow into a man's full reach across his 20s. 8 spider legs braced themselves on the field. The bull horns curved up at the temples. The torso plated itself in obsidian. The pentagram lit at his feet in a circle 30 feet across. The eyes burned the color of a furnace door left open. The 2 forms stood across from each other in the field. Susanoo raised the Totsuka blade. The Ushi Oni raised one spider leg. They met in the middle. The clash sent a shock wave across the field that flattened a stand of grass 40 feet wide in every direction. Susanoo's blade struck the spider leg, and the blade rang. The spider leg pushed the blade aside. The Susanoo's other arm came around with the Yata mirror, and the mirror met a 2nd spider leg from Naruto's other side, and the mirror held against the leg for a count of 2 seconds before the leg passed through it like a needle through silk. Itachi inside the Susanoo blinked. The mirror has never been pierced. It is a fine piece of work. It was not built against my kind. The Ushi Oni pressed forward. The spider legs moved at speeds the Susanoo could not match. The 3rd leg came around and hooked the Susanoo's left arm and pulled. The arm came off at the shoulder in a fall of crystalline light. Susanoo staggered. Itachi inside it coughed blood. The Mangekyo Sharingan in his eyes was bleeding down his cheeks in 2 thin red lines. He looked across at the boy. He said, in a voice that did not carry past the inside of his Susanoo, Good. He went into the final technique, the one he had been saving, the one he had only used twice. He concentrated the entire Susanoo into a single Totsuka blade thrust at the center mass of the Uchioni, and the thrust went in. The thrust was meant to seal a soul. It did not seal Naruto's soul. The soul inside Naruto was older than the Totsuka. The Totsuka was a tool refined by a clan 2,000 years younger than the man it was attempting to seal. The blade reached the boy's center. The blade slid in. The blade encountered, inside Naruto's chest, a thing that the Uchiha clan's history had never been written to describe. And the blade itself began to bend. The Totsuka came apart in Itachi's hand. The Susanoo collapsed. Itachi fell to his knees in the field. He had spent everything he had. The illness in his lungs had risen to the back of his throat. He coughed once, twice, 3 times into his sleeve, and the sleeve came back red. Naruto folded out of the Uchioni in a slow descent of legs and chitin. He walked across the field to where Itachi was kneeling. He stopped 2 paces from him. You did well. You are everything they said. I am more. I am aware. You wanted to die today. I did. I will not give you that. Itachi looked up. Why? Because you have a brother. The brother needs to write the letter. You need to read it. I will buy you the year. I will send a medic to your hideout next week, a woman named Shizune, who is older than you remember her and far more skilled than the medics you have access to. She will keep you alive for 2 more years. In those 2 years, you will write to your brother yourself, in your own hand, and you will tell him what was asked of you, and you will let him be the one to decide what to do with the answer. Do not deny him that. He has the right. And in return, you will tell me what you came to tell me. The masked man's next move, Akatsuki's next gathering, the location of the leader. Itachi looked at him for a long count, he told him. He spoke for 10 minutes in the slow, level voice of a man giving testimony at the end of his life. He told Naruto where Pain lived, in a tower at the heart of Omegakure. He told him that the rest of Akatsuki was scheduled to convene at that tower in 11 days. He told him that the masked man was not Madara, but a younger Uchiha who had taken the name, and that the younger Uchiha's true identity was something he had learned only 6 months ago and had been waiting to tell someone he trusted. He named the masked man. Naruto did not interrupt. When Itachi had finished, Naruto extended his hand. He helped him to his feet. Go to the eastern coast. Send word to Shizune through the courier at the temple of Otomura. She will find you. Do not come back to Konoha until your brother sends for you, and he will send for you in time. Walk. Itachi walked. He picked up his straw hat. He set it on his head. He bowed to the boy in the field, a low bow, the bow of a man who had received a verdict and had heard it more kindly than he expected. He turned. He walked into the trees. Naruto stood in the field for a long time after he had gone. The sun went the rest of the way down. The first stars came out. He picked up his cane. He walked home. Ino was on the porch. Did he live? He lived. He had a brother. The brother needed the letter. You are too kind sometimes. I am kind to specific people. He was one of them tonight. The rest of his colleagues will receive a different mood. When? 11 days. All of them. All of them. I am taking Jiraiya, Asuma, Kakashi, Shikamaru's father. I am leaving you here. Do not argue with me on this one. I have read the masked man. He will move on you the moment I leave the village. I refuse to give him the window. You think he'll come for me. I know he will. I have been waiting for him to try. I would rather he try while I am still in the country. Ino set her teacup down. She looked at him. If he comes, buy time, hide, use the seal Jiraiya taught you. The seal will call me. I will hear it across the country. I will arrive inside the hour. The hour will be the worst hour of your life, and I am sorry in advance for that. I cannot prevent it. I can only promise the arrival. All right, Ino, yes, I am sorry. For what? For the hour. She crossed the porch. She set both her hands on his face. She kissed him. It was the first kiss. It was not a long kiss. It was the kiss of a kunoichi who had decided that a particular line had been waiting too long to be crossed. She stepped back. She set her forehead against his for the count of 1 breath. On the porch, she said. On the porch. He left the village on the morning of the 5th day. He left at sunrise with Jiraiya, Asuma, Kakashi, and Shikaku Nara, the Nara clan head who had volunteered for the trip. the moment Hiruzen had named the destination, because Shikaku had been waiting 2 years for a chance to put his hands on the Akatsuki's leadership in person. They moved north and west out of the village in a loose column, 4 of them in Jonin gear and Naruto in his black coat with the mother-of-pearl buttons. They covered ground at the pace of the slowest of them, which was Shikaku, who was a thinker rather than a runner, and who had asked before they left to be allowed to keep up rather than be carried. They were 2 days from the rain border at that pace. The masked man moved on the 3rd hour after Naruto's departure. He had been watching the gate. He had a team of 4 with him. 3 former Mist Hunter nin he had purchased from a defunct contract 2 years prior, and 1 chunin from the Sound Remnant who had been desperate enough to take the work. He had also brought himself, in his intangible form, with his single visible Sharingan in the eye hole of the mask. He had timed the strike for the exact window when Ino's father was at the Hokage Tower for a council session, and her mother was at the market, and Shino was at the Aburame compound for his weekly clan meeting. And the Yamanaka flower field was attended only by an apprentice gardener who would be no obstacle to the 4 hunters. They came over the back fence in a wedge. The apprentice gardener went down in the first second, a senbon in the side of the neck, alive but unconscious. The 4 hunters fanned across the field. The masked man stayed at the gate, his arms folded inside his sleeves, his single Sharingan turning slowly in the eye hole. Ino was in the south plot. She had been planting bellflowers, the same row Naruto had helped her restake a month before. She had her hair pulled back. She had her kunai pouch on her thigh. She had her father's seal paper in her sash, the seal Jiraiya had taught her, the one that would call Naruto across the country if she activated it. She felt them come over the fence. She had been training for 2 years in low-grade chakra sensing under her father's instruction. She had become a young woman who could feel 4 sets of hostile intent crossing a fence behind her, and she had been waiting in the small, private corner of her mind that did not tell Naruto everything for the day this kind of crossing would happen. She did not stand up. She slid her hand to the kunai pouch on her thigh. She pulled out 3 kunai. She slid the seal paper into her left palm. She bit her thumb on the kunai's edge. She let the blood touch the seal paper. The seal activated. A black mark bloomed across the back of her left hand. The mark was a small, stylized version of Naruto's pentagram. The mark grew warm. The mark sent a signal up out of her hand and into the air over the village, and the signal carried east across the country in a thin thread of black chakra that crossed the continent at the speed of intent. In the column on the road 200 miles east, Naruto stopped walking. He turned his head. Jiraiya. Yes, he moved. On Ino. Take Asuma. Take Kakashi. Take Shikaku. Continue to the city. I will rejoin you inside the day. If I am late, begin the operation without me. Pain will have been alerted by the masked man's absence at the gathering, and the window will close. Naruto. Continue, Jiraiya. The errand goes on with or without me. I will return as soon as I am able. Inside the day. You have my word. He turned. He bent his knees. He pushed off the road. He covered the first 10 miles in the time it took Jiraiya to draw breath to argue. By the time Asuma had turned around to look behind him, the boy was gone from the road, and a thin black streak was moving across the southern sky in the direction of the village at a speed that none of them could measure. Ano, in the field, was on her feet now. The 4 hunters had cleared the fence. The first of them came at her from the left with a wakizashi drawn. She was 15. She was the daughter of the Yamanaka head. She had been trained for 2 years by Asuma Sarutobi in close-quarter combat, and for the last 6 months in advanced clan techniques by her father directly. She had not yet had a fight where she was the only target in the room. She had it now. She moved. She caught the wakizashi on the kunai in her right hand. She turned. She threw the second kunai into the eye of the hunter, coming up behind the first. The hunter dropped. She slid under the wakizashi's second swing and came up inside the first hunter's guard with her third kunai and put it through the side of his throat. He fell. She turned. The remaining 2 hunters had stopped advancing. They had seen the first 2 go down in under 3 seconds, and the briefing they had been given had said the girl was a soft target And the briefing had been wrong. She did not give them time to recalibrate. She projected. Her mind transfer crossed the 8 feet of bellflower row between them and landed in the third hunter's body. The third hunter's hand drew his sword and put it into the fourth hunter's stomach. The fourth hunter fell, gasping. Her mind hopped back to her own body. The third hunter, his eyes wide, raised his hand to throw a senbon at her, and she threw her last kunai and put it through his forearm before the senbon could leave his fingers. He fell to his knees, clutching his arm. The field was, by the count of 7 seconds, hers again. She turned to the gate. The masked man was still there. His arms were still folded inside his sleeves. The single Sharingan turned in the eye hole of the mask. My, he said. The reports underestimated you. I will have to revise them. You are not coming through this gate. I am, though. I am intangible. You cannot stop me. Your father's seal will have called him. He will be coming. The seal is in your hand. I can see it from here. I am told it works. I am also told that the country is wide, and that even your boy moves at the speed of a falcon rather than the speed of light, and I have at least 30 minutes before he arrives. 30 minutes is a long time to spend with you, child. I plan to use it well. You will not get 30 minutes. How long then? 23. The masked man laughed. It was a soft, rasping laugh. And how do you propose to delay me for 23 minutes? By using the second seal. He stopped laughing. What second seal? The one my father added to the first one without telling Naruto, because he doesn't trust strangers in masks any further than he can throw them, and he has a particular dislike of you in particular. The first seal called Naruto. The second one calls every active Yamanaka in the village. There are 11 of them. They will be here in 2 minutes. Several of them are jonin. One of them is my father. You may want to use the next 2 minutes wisely. She raised her left hand. The pentagram on her hand pulsed. A second mark in green ink woke beneath it. It went up into the air over the village in a second thread, and the thread spread out across the rooftops of the Yamanaka compound and beyond. The masked man stared at her hand. You little. Run or stay. The clock has started. He moved. He moved in his intangibility. He came through the gate as a ghost, his body passing through the wood and the air, and he crossed the field at a flicker speed. Ino could not have caught with any technique she had. He intended to take her by the throat. He intended to drag her into his pocket dimension. He intended to be out of the country before any Yamanaka Jonin reached the field. He reached her. His hand passed through her shoulder. He solidified. He grabbed her by the upper arm. She was already moving. She had thrown herself sideways at the moment he solidified, and she had her last weapon in her free hand. A small seal tag her father had given her after Part 1's invasion. A single-use paralysis tag that she had been carrying in her sash for 2 years for an occasion exactly like this one. She slapped it on his wrist. The tag activated. His arm seized. He cursed. He went intangible again to release her, and the tag passed out of him with the rest of his body, because intangibility was intangibility, and the tag fell into the grass. But she was free. She was running. She made it 3 steps before he was in front of her again, materializing out of the air at her path, and she ducked under his grab and rolled and came up 6 feet away with the last of her tools, a smoke bomb, in her hand. The smoke bomb went off. The field filled with smoke. The masked man swore in 3 languages in the smoke. He started to chase her. He was, however, also tracking the 2 threads in the air over the village, and he was, by his estimation, 11 minutes into the 23. The first Yamanaka Jonin signature was crossing the western rooftops at speed. The other 10 were spreading out in a net across the compound. He had less time than the girl had claimed. She had lied to him about the count. The 2 minutes had been a bluff. He was about to dive into the smoke and grab her anyway when the temperature on the field dropped. It dropped by 10 degrees. It dropped by 15. It dropped by 20. The smoke in the field thinned. The grass under his feet frosted over. A pentagram lit on the dirt under his sandals, but it was not the one he had been expecting. It was larger. It was older. It was etched in black flame so dense that the lines burned without consuming the dirt beneath them. The sky above the flower field, shadowed by half a shade. He looked up. The boy in the black coat was at the gate. He had not come from the east, he had come from the south. He had taken a different angle. He had gathered, in the last 10 minutes of his flight across the country, every ounce of momentum and intent he had ever held, and he had refined it down to a single shape, and the shape was the shape of a man who had walked into a place where the woman he cared for had been threatened. The masked man looked at him. The masked man took a step backward. He had read every report on the boy. He had spoken to Kasame after the coast. He had read Itachi's debriefing. He had not understood until this moment what the reports had been trying to convey. The boy at the gate was not the boy from the reports. The boy at the gate was the original, the source, the thing that the reports had been pale watercolors of. Crown, he said, step away from her. Step away. The masked man stepped away. He went intangible. He went into his pocket dimension. He came out 3 feet behind Naruto with a kunai in his hand, and the intent to put the kunai through the back of the boy's skull and be gone before the boy could turn. He never finished the swing. Naruto's hand was around his wrist. The boy had turned. In the time between the masked man going intangible and the masked man re-emerging, and had positioned his hand at the exact point where the masked man would reappear, and his hand had closed before the masked man's body had finished forming. The kunai dropped from the masked man's fingers and into the grass. Touch the flower again, Naruto said, his face an inch from the mask, and I will burn the entire garden of your plan to ash, root, and seed. The masked man went intangible. His wrist passed through Naruto's hand. He flickered backward across the field. He came up at the far fence with his back to the wood. His chest was heaving inside the cloak. The Sharingan in the eye hole was turning at a speed that he had not used in years. The Ushi Oni came up out of Naruto in full. It came up to its tallest height. The pentagram on the dirt grew to fill the entire south plot of the flower field. The bellflowers inside it did not wilt. The pentagram had been refined over the last 2 years to spare what Naruto had chosen to spare. The bellflowers stood. The grass around the bellflowers turned to black glass. The Ushi Oni looked across the field at the masked man. A wave of Conqueror's haki went out of it. It was the largest wave the form had ever produced. It crossed the field. It crossed the fence. It crossed the streets behind the fence. It went out across the entire Yamanaka compound and beyond. And in the streets of the village, half a mile in every direction, every civilian dropped to one knee and clutched their head. And every animal in the village went silent at the same moment. And the air over Konoha turned a shade heavier. The masked man at the fence dropped to one knee. His Sharingan went black. He gasped. He had not been on his knees in front of another being in 20 years. He stayed on his knees for 2 seconds. Then he went intangible again, because intangibility was the one thing he had that the boy had not yet found a way around, and his body folded into the air and out of the field and into his pocket dimension, and the dimension closed behind him, and he was gone. The pentagram dimmed. The Ushi Oni folded. Naruto stood in the south plot of the flower field in his coat, in the hush of the village around him, with the apprentice gardener still unconscious by the fence, and the 4 hunters on the ground at various distances, and Ino standing in the middle of the bellflower row with her hand to her chest. He walked across the row to her. He stopped in front of her. He did not say anything. She set her forehead against the front of his coat, against the mother-of-pearl buttons. "You were 26 minutes, she said. I was 16. You said inside the hour. I lied. I knew I would be faster. You were. You delayed him. I delayed him. You used the second seal. My father added it. He didn't tell you because he didn't want you to think he didn't trust you. He didn't trust you. He doesn't trust anyone, but mostly the masked man. He was right not to trust him. Your father is a wise man. He'll be here in a minute. So will the other 10 Yamanaka Jonin. They'll find me alive, you in the field, 4 hunters on the ground, and you holding me on the porch. The whole compound will talk about it for a year. I don't care. I want you to hold me on the porch." He held her on the porch. The Yamanaka Jonin arrived in a wedge over the south fence inside the minute. Inoichi came over the fence at the front of the wedge with 2 kunai already drawn and his face the color of new milk. He landed on the grass. He took in the field in a single sweep. He saw his daughter alive. He saw the boy with his arms around her. He saw the 4 hunters on the ground. He saw the apprentice gardener stirring at the fence. He sat down in the grass. He sat down because his knees had decided in that moment that they had run far enough. The other Yamanaka Jonin secured the field. The hunters were taken into custody. The apprentice gardener was revived and sent to a medic. The masked man's kunai was sealed inside a containment scroll and sent to the Hokage. The compound buzzed for the rest of the day with the news that the crown had crossed the country in 16 minutes and that the Yamanaka heiress had taken down 4 hunter nin on her own in under 10 seconds. Naruto and Ino sat on the porch. They sat there for an hour. He did not let go of her hand. She did not ask him to. After a long time, he said, "I have to go back." To the rain. To the rain. He has been alerted. The masked man will not return today. The leader is at the city now. He will have heard about the field by the morning. I have to be there before the morning. Go, Ino. I'm telling you to go. Finish it. Come home. The porch will be here. I will. I know. He kissed her. He did not press his lips to her forehead this time. He kissed her on the mouth, the second kiss of his life and hers, and he kissed her for the count of 3 breaths. He let her go. He stood. He picked up his cane. He went over the back fence in a single bound and was gone across the rooftops to the north and west. He caught the column on the border of the rain country at moonrise. Jiraiya was at the head of the line. Asuma was at the rear. Kakashi was on the left. Shikaku was on the right. They had moved at full pace since dawn and had covered the distance the crown had told them to cover, and they had stopped at the border to wait for him because Jiraiya had said when Asuma had asked, "He'll be here by moonrise." He said the day. He meant the day. The moon was up 6 minutes when Naruto walked out of the trees. His coat had blood on the right sleeve that had not been there at the dawn. It was not his blood. He did not explain it. Jiraiya did not ask. "She's alive," Jiraiya said. "She is. The masked one. Fled, intangible. I could not finish him today. I will finish him later. He will not come back for her. He has learned the lesson." Then we go. We go. They crossed the border at the 2nd hour past moonrise. The rain country in those years was a strip of land that lay under a permanent ceiling of gray cloud, fed by the chakra of the city at its center. The rain fell year-round at a steady, slanting angle. The roads were puddles. The trees were stunted. The villages along the border had been emptied by drift. Their inhabitants moved into the central city by promise and by force. The country had become, in effect, a single building, and the building's name was Amegakure. They moved on the city in 3 nights. Conan met them at the outer ring. She came down out of the rain in a fall of paper. The paper assembled itself into the shape of a woman in a black cloak with red clouds, with a paper flower in her hair, and the woman stood in the road in front of them with her hands at her sides and her eyes on the boy in the black coat at the head of the line. "You are expected," she said. "I know. He will see you. He has been waiting. He says he has been waiting since before you were born. He has been waiting for a different man. He will receive me instead. I will give him the conversation he deserves. Come." She turned. She walked. They followed. The city of Amegakure rose around them as they entered the outer ring. It was a city of towers built into towers, of bridges between them at every level, of windows lit in long vertical rows. The rain ran down the towers in sheets. The streets at ground level were canals. They walked along the edge of a canal toward the central tower, which rose at the heart of the city like a finger pointed at the cloud cover overhead. At the foot of the central tower, Conan stopped. "He is at the top. He will receive you alone. He will receive all of us." He said alone. He misunderstood. "He will receive all of us, or I will pull the tower down around him. You may carry the message up before us if you prefer." She looked at him for a long count. "I will carry the message." She went up the tower in a column of paper. She returned 3 minutes later. She inclined her head. "All of you." They went up the tower. The top floor was a single open chamber with no walls, only the framework of the tower's beams and the rain falling in on every side. At the center of the chamber stood 6 figures in black cloaks with red clouds. They were the 6 paths of pain. They had been arranged in a half circle facing the door. The central figure had red hair and ringed eyes, and the eyes were the Rinnegan, and the eyes turned on Naruto as he came up out of the stairwell. "Crown of Konoha," the central figure said. Its voice was layered, the voice of 6 bodies speaking in unison. "You have come. I have. You have come to discuss the future of the shinobi world. I have come to remove an obstruction. You preach peace with a god's voice in a corpse's hands. I have heard better sermons from insects." The 6 bodies of pain did not move. Then they did. They moved at once. The animal path summoned a multi-headed dog the size of a building. The Asura path opened in its chest cavity, and a barrage of mechanical arms unfolded with cannons mounted at their wrists. The Preta path raised its hands, and a wide chakra absorption field opened around it. The Naraka path positioned itself behind the others and called up its King of Hell, which loomed behind the half circle in a column of red shadow. The human path opened its palms toward the door. The Deva path, the central one with the red hair, lifted one hand, and gravity in the chamber inverted by half. The 4 jonin at Naruto's back braced themselves against the floor and the beams to keep from being lifted. Naruto did not brace. He walked forward across the chamber against the gravity inversion as if the gravity had not changed at all. "Begin," he said. They began. The fight that followed lasted 12 minutes. It would later be written about, in the back of a small black book, in an Anbu operative's pocket, as the largest single set-piece engagement the village of Omegakure had ever hosted, and the last one that village would host for a generation. The animal path's dog came down on the central tower's top floor with the force of a collapsing building, and the floor held only because Naruto had reinforced it with a single hand laid flat against the beam under his sandals. The Asura path's cannons fired across the chamber, and the cannon fire reached the boy's coat and turned to mist before it touched him. The Preta path's absorption field reached him and met an outer layer of Conqueror's Haki, and could not draw a thread of chakra from him, because the thing inside him was not chakra and could not be drained. He let them try for the first minute. He let them try because he wanted them to know, before he answered, that they had been allowed to try. Then he answered. He extended one hand, and the animal path's dog came apart in the middle in a single horizontal slash of his eye verdict, and the 2 halves of the dog fell off the tower in opposite directions, and the dog hit the ground a half-mile below in 2 separate craters. He extended the other hand, and the Asura path's mechanical body came apart at the joints in a wave of focused Conqueror's pressure, and the path collapsed into a heap of armor on the floor. He looked at the Preta path, and the Preta path's chest exploded outward in a spray of black flame that consumed the absorption field from the inside. The Naraka path raised the King of Hell. The King of Hell looked down at Naruto. Naruto looked back at it. The King of Hell, which had been built to interrogate souls and to restore bodies that had been broken, turned its face away from him and refused to engage. The Naraka path stared up at its own summon in disbelief. The King of Hell did not return its summoner's stare. The summon, which had answered every order it had been given for 10 years, had decided that the thing standing in front of it was an older entry in a list it had been keeping since its creation, and it would not place its face in front of an older entry. The Naraka path tried to dispel and resummon. Naruto closed the distance to it in 3 steps and put one hand on the path's chest, and the chest came apart in black flame. The human path tried to flicker behind him and put its hand into his skull to draw the soul out. His head turned the 1/4 inch as the path's hand came in. He caught the path's wrist. He bent the path backward across his knee. He broke the path's spine. He set the body on the floor. The Deva path, the central body, raised both hands. It performed Shinra Tensei at full output. The wave of repulsive force went out across the chamber in a half sphere that should have leveled the top 3 floors of the tower and pushed every living thing in the chamber out into the rain. The wave reached Naruto. The wave met the same thing that Suzanu's Yata mirror had met 2 weeks before. The wave passed through him without moving him. The wave continued past him. The far wall of the chamber blew outward into the rain. The 4 jonin at the door braced themselves against the beams and held. The Deva path stared. It looked at the boy in the black coat who had not moved, in the center of the wave that had just demolished the back half of the chamber. "You are not a man," the Devapath said. I am older than the word for man. I have lived more lives than this village has had Hokage. I choose in every one of them to end the day at your gate. He stepped forward. He extended one hand. The full Ushi Oni did not come up. He had no need for it. The fight had moved past the point where he needed the form. He extended one hand at the Devapath's chest, and a single focused beam of Conqueror's Haki went out of his palm and crossed the chamber and hit the path between the eyes. The path's head came off in a single neat motion. The body fell. The other 5 bodies fell with it, because the paths had been linked to the Deva, and the Deva's death had cut the threads. The chamber went still. The rain came in through the broken back wall. Naruto turned. He walked across the chamber to the far end of the floor, where a single doorway opened onto a smaller chamber that he had felt the moment he had come up the stairs, because the real chakra signature in the tower had been in that smaller room the whole time, hidden behind the paths. The smaller room held Naruto Uzumaki. He sat in a black metal chair, his body thin to the point of skeleton, his red hair limp around his face, his ringed eyes turned up to look at the boy in the doorway. He had been controlling the 6 paths from this chair. He had not moved from it in 8 years. He had spent most of those years staring at the wall, and the wall had a hole in it now where the wave of his own jutsu had come through. Naruto walked over to the chair. He sat down on a smaller stool beside it. You are Uzumaki. By blood. I am Uzumaki by name in this lifetime. I knew before you came. You have a question for me. I have many questions. I will ask one. Do you believe in peace, Crown? I believe in gardens. Peace is the soil. I water the soil. I do not call it by your name. My way would have given the world peace. Your way would have given the world a graveyard, and you would have called the hush after the graves of peace, and the hush would have been your peace rather than the world's. I have seen 4 cities your way ends in. I have seen them across 4 lifetimes. They are still places. They are also empty. The world is no better for them. It is only stiller. There is a difference. The difference is the only thing that has ever mattered. Nagato looked at him for a long count. You will kill me. I will not. You will kill yourself in your own time with the technique you have been holding for the last 3 years. The technique that brings the dead back to life and costs the user his own. You will use it on the children of this city. You will bring back every child your war has killed since the first day. You will die in the chair you have sat in for 8 years. You will be remembered as the man who emptied his life into the city he had emptied. And you will be remembered well, because the children you bring back will tell their children about you. This is the only ending I will permit you. Take it or do not. Nagato closed his eyes. He nodded. I will take it. Then I am finished here. Naruto stood. He walked out of the smaller chamber. He walked across the broken top floor of the tower. The 4 jonin at the door watched him pass. He inclined his head a quarter-inch to Jiraiya, who returned the nod. Konan stood at the head of the stairwell with both her hands at her sides. He will use the technique tonight, Naruto told her. He will die in the chair. Make sure the children of the city are brought to the tower before dawn. He has prepared a list. The list is in the drawer of the chair. Carry out his last instruction. After that, you are the leader of this city. Govern it well. I will return in 5 years to see what you have built. If I am pleased, I will leave you to it. If I am not, I will come back with my cane. She inclined her head. Crown. He went down the stairs. The rain stopped at the 3rd hour after dawn the next morning. It stopped because Naruto Uzumaki, in the chair he had sat in for 8 years, had performed his final technique and had given his life to bring back every child in the city that his war had taken. And the chakra that had been holding the cloud ceiling overhead had returned at the moment of his death to the sky. The sky cleared. The sun came over the towers of Amegakure for the first time in 25 years. The city's citizens came out into the streets and stood in the sun with their hands raised. The children Nagato had brought back walked out of the tower at dawn into the arms of their parents. The masked man was not in the city. He had been told by Konan in the hours before Naruto's arrival that his presence would not be welcome in the tower for the meeting. He had taken the dismissal at face value. He had retreated to his own hidden base across the country to await news. The news, when it came, was that his organization had been disassembled in 12 minutes, that his only ally in the world had spent his life on a list of children, and that the crown of Konoha had walked out of the city at sunrise. The masked man sat in his base for a long time. He did not move for 3 days. At the end of the 3rd day, he rose, removed his mask, looked at his own reflection in the rain-streaked window of his chamber, and made the decision he had been postponing for a long time. He left his base. He went to ground. He spent the next 40 years of his life moving from one small village to another under a series of false names, never gathering a second organization, never approaching Konoha again, because he had been told by his single visible Sharingan that his entire plan was unworkable while the boy in the black coat was breathing, and the boy in the black coat showed every sign of breathing for a long, long time. He died, eventually, in a fishing village in the land of waves, of old age, in his sleep, in a room he had rented for the night. He was buried in a small graveyard on a hillside. No one knew who he was. He had wanted it that way. The column came back into Konoha at the 7th hour of the 8th day after they had left. The gates were open. The streets were lined. Word had traveled ahead of them, the way word travels in a shinobi village, in small, fast threads through the windows and the alleys and the tea houses, and by the time they reached the central square, half the village was on the rooftops and the other half was in the road. Hiruzen was at the steps of the Hokage Tower in his formal robes with his pipe in his hand. He had not put on the formal robes in 2 years. He had put them on for this morning. The 5 of them walked up to the steps of the tower. Jiraiya bowed first, Asuma bowed second, Kakashi bowed third, Shikaku bowed fourth. Naruto inclined his head a 1/4 inch. Lord third, crown, it is finished. I am aware. The Rain ambassador arrived at dawn. He brought a letter from the new leader of Amigakure. The letter is short. It thanks the village for the courtesy of the visit. It promises an embassy by the end of the year. The letter is the first letter that city has sent any other country in 20 years. Good. Walk with me, Crown. They walked. They walked along the path that ran around the base of the Hokage monument. Hiruzen with his pipe. Naruto with his cane. The morning sun came over the carved faces of the 4 previous Hokages on the cliff above them. You have given the village a peace it did not earn, Hiruzen said. I have given the village a peace it built around me for 7 years. I am the lock on the door. The house is the village's. It always was. The house was good before I came. The house will be good after I leave. After you leave. In time, I will outlive this body by a great deal. When this body falls, I will go on. I do not know where I will go. The man who sent me did not say. He sent me once. He may send me again. I have a suspicion he will not. I have a suspicion that this was the last assignment. You have a suspicion you may simply live here. I have a hope, Lord Third, the first hope I have had in 4 centuries. Hiruzen smiled. He drew on his pipe. He let the smoke out into the morning. Then live here. I intend to. With the girl, with the woman, with the woman. They walked. After a long time, Hiruzen said, Asuma. He has been a fine sensei. He has been more than a sensei. He has been an older brother to you. He has. I will tell him. He has earned the words. Tell him today. Today. And Shino. I will tell him too. He has been steadier than any of us in this. He held the gate while I held the field. He is the kind of teammate a man builds a life around. I will say so to his face this afternoon. Good. They walked back to the tower. At the steps, Hiruzen turned. He looked at the boy in the black coat, at the cane, at the whisker marks on the cheeks that had faded a shade. He set one hand on the boy's shoulder. Thank you, Naruto. Thank you, Lord Third. Go home. He went home. He stopped first at the Chunin training grounds, where Asuma was running a drill with 3 new genin he had picked up the year before. He stood at the edge of the field until Asuma saw him. He waited until Asuma finished the drill and walked over to him. He set one hand on Asuma's shoulder, the way the Hokage had set a hand on his. You have been my brother, he said. Asuma's cigarette stayed in his mouth for a long count. He nodded. He set his own hand on Naruto's shoulder. He did not speak. He did not need to. Naruto walked on. He stopped at the Aburame compound. Shino was in the inner garden, kneeling beside a row of beehives with a smoke can in one hand. Naruto did not enter the garden. He stood at the gate. Shino looked up. He nodded. Naruto nodded back. Thank you, Shino. Naruto, that is all. I will see you at supper. I will be there. Naruto walked on. He came to the gate of the Yamanaka flower field at noon. The gate was open. The afternoon sun was on the bellflowers. The bees were working the south plot. Inoichi was on the porch with a cup of tea, and Inoichi's wife was at the well, and Ino was kneeling at the edge of the south plot in the same posture she had been in the day. Naruto had first walked through this gate 7 years before, with her tongue at the corner of her mouth in concentration, patting dirt around the roots of a young iris with both hands. She looked up when he came through the gate. She rose. She wiped her hands on her apron. She walked across the rows of color to him through the field of bees and petals. She stopped 2 paces from him. She looked at his coat. There was no blood on it. There was a thin line of ash on the right shoulder that she would brush off later. There was a long, thin scrape on the side of his cane that had not been there when he left. The mother-of-pearl buttons caught the noon sun. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would. 8 days. I am sorry." She stepped forward. She took both his hands in hers. She looked up at him. Her hair had come loose at the temple again. She had a smudge of soil on one cheek. She had grown 3 inches in the year that had passed since the second arc of his life had begun, and she was almost his height now, and she looked at him with the chin tilt she had first used at 9. "On the porch," she said, "on the porch." They went to the porch. He sat down on the porch step. She sat down beside him. Inoichi, sensing the moment, rose from his chair and went into the kitchen with a small, knowing tilt of his own head. Inoichi's wife at the well went after a beat into the house behind her husband. The porch was theirs. He turned to her. He set the cane against the railing. "I have a line," he said. "I have been writing it for 7 years. I will deliver it now. It will not be eloquent. It is mine. Tell me, the first time I came through your gate, I was 8. I had blood on my sleeves. You did not scream. You took me to a stone in the field and you washed the blood off my face. I made a vow then. I did not tell you. I have not told you in 7 years. I will tell you now. Tell me. I vowed that the field would stand. I vowed that you would stand. I vowed that anything that came through this gate with the intent to harm you would pass through me first and would regret it. I have kept the vow. I will keep it for the rest of this body's life. And if there is another life after this one for me, I will keep it in that one as well. The vow has no date on it. It has no country on it. It has no treaty under it. It is mine and it is yours and it will hold." She was crying. She was crying without making a sound. She had not made a sound when she cried since she was 9. "That is the line," he said. "Naruto. Yes, that is a very long line. I told you it would not be eloquent. It is the most eloquent thing I have ever heard." He set his hand against the side of her face. He brushed the smudge of soil off her cheek with his thumb. He looked at her for a long count, and the noon sun on the porch was warm, and the bees in the south plot were going about their drunken, important little errands. And somewhere in the village, a chunin was running a drill, and somewhere else a vegetable cart was rattling past a fence, and somewhere else a pigeon was tilting its head at a stranger. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he had said the words out loud. She had said hers in a forest by a fire. He had been saving his for the porch. "I know," she said. "I have known since I was 9. I waited for you to say it because it was your line, not mine." He laughed. It was a real laugh. It came up out of his chest in a sound she had heard exactly twice in 7 years. He kissed her. The kiss lasted longer than the 2 before it. The kiss had nothing to prove and nothing to hurry. The kiss was the seal at the end of a document that had taken 2 lifetimes to write, and the seal pressed into the wax, and the wax cooled, and the document closed. After a long while, she set her forehead against his. "What now?" she said. "Now we eat lunch, and after lunch. After lunch, we plant the rest of the iris row. The roots are still in the basket. You did not finish them this morning because I came home late. And after the row. After the row, we walk to the temple of Otomura. We have not walked the lily pond at sunset in 2 years. We are owed. And after the lily pond, we come back to the porch. We sit. We watch the lanterns come on across the village. We sleep, we rise, we do the next day, we do the day after that. We do every day in this field, on this porch in this village, for as long as I am given to do them. The errand is finished. The garden is mine. The garden is yours. The garden is ours. She set her forehead against his for a long count. All right, she said. All right. They sat on the porch. Eiichiro came out, after a while, with 3 bowls of rice and the pot of soup that had been on the stove since the morning. Eiichiro's wife came out with a small dish of pickles. The 4 of them ate on the porch in the noon sun. Asuma stopped by at the second bell, on his way home from the training grounds, and was waved up onto the porch and given a bowl of his own. Shino came by at the 3rd bell, and Hiruzen came by at the 4th, having walked down from the tower in his formal robes, which he had not yet had time to change out of, and the porch was, by the 4th bell, full of people, and the south plot of the flower field stood in the afternoon sun, with the iris roots still in their basket waiting to be planted, and a pigeon on the fence tilted its head at the porch with the same curiosity a cat had once shown an 8-year-old boy in an alley. The boy with the cane sat at the center of the porch with the woman he cared for on his left, and the village he had chosen to live in spread around him on every side, and his hand was on her hand, and her hand was on his, and the garden stood. The garden would stand. He had returned. He would not leave again.
Damn, what a ride. If this demon Naruto saga hit you like a conqueror's blast, smash that like button, subscribe for more insane fanfic breakdowns, and drop your favorite moment in the comments. The garden stands. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.